What class would Narita be if you were to try to make him a D&D? I feel like it would be some kind of monk rogue multi-class. Anyways, hello and welcome back to the Wana. My name is Beast, and today we're back with Hello Lady. At the same time, I guess like a Battlemaster fighter could also kind of work. Hard to say. Oh well. Yeah. Fucking damn it. Anyways, let's just get into this. I've already completely like shown off that I'm completely going brain dead again. Anyways, it's called it was completely dark out. It's called darkness began to paint the sky, wind began to blow, making Sorako shiver a bit. Her face was still warm thanks to her immense joy, however.
急に冷え込んできたね。昼間は暑いくらいなのに。
この場所が風の通りが良いのかもしれない。もう少しこちらへ来たまえ。
Embrace Sorako, sharing our warmth.
成田くんと触れ合っていると、とても暖かい。
We exchanged a smile from as close to each other as possible. Then we naturally went in for a kiss. The situation proved that our desire for one another flared up oh so easily. We forgot that we were outside and lost ourselves in the kiss.
そういえば、野外どころか監視カメラがあったはずだ。
The Academy's incredibly thorough security reached places that most students wouldn't have even ever imagined. And as far as I was aware, this bench was the focus of 3 cameras and microphones. Oh no!
だがやめない!
My passion couldn't be stopped by the simple fact that we were being observed. Also, I felt no shame in showing off my perfect body. Though I didn't really enjoy the thought of someone other than me could look at Sorako's snow-white bare skin. So I decided to move to a position that placed her in the camera's blind spot.
成田くん、いっぱいキスしてほしい。
Tokino's just like being notified, like something's going on in the garden, like show me the fucking footage. What the fuck is this? Well, it seems it is Miss Katsuragi having intercourse with Mr. Narita. Can I like go and break that up? Why? Just fucking do it. It's way too fucking awkward. Like the guards just like trying to get him like, you know, I kind of have to stay here. Like I'm on duty for something else right now. So I can't really go break them up. Well, I just saw that my lunch break started, so I'm not gonna go do that. Well, guess someone else will have to take over for me. They're all just trying to push the task of breaking up these 2 fucking teenagers, like literally fucking teenagers up. I'm glad he responded to that request. This moment seems to be freed from the shacks of time, making it feel eternal.
待って、成田くん。
野外で戸惑う気持ちもよくわかるとも。だが、そういうのが良いのではないかね。
そうじゃなくて、成田くん。
Continued kissing her, but she showed more restraint than resistance than usual, so I stopped for a moment.
なんだろ
う。僕だけじゃなくて、彼女にも分けてあげたい。
Listen up, you're going to fuck my other personality. There was no need for me to even ask what she meant.
楽しみも。
うん。
私は一向に構わないが、本人的にはどうなのかね。強引な愛も趣はあるが、無理やりとなると個人的な主義に反するのだよ。
大丈夫だと思う。
Her face turned rosy as she nodded. Soroko's proposal seemed odd even to me. She wished to share love with the other being inside her. But wasn't that the equivalent of letting her beloved cheat on her? Or was it not cheating due to the fact that in a way both of them were Sorako? This was a philosophical problem. As someone who just told them to find their happiness, I had no reason to refuse.
ソラコらしいとは思う。しかし普通にこういったシーンに呼んで彼女は現れるものかね。
だから
She spread her arms and bared herself to me with the face of a child who just cooked up the perfect prank.
来て。
Finally realized her intention, so I responded by kissing her again.
メガネかける。
Once she did that, she changed completely.
大丈夫だから。あなたも一緒に来てほしい。そんなこんなのダメだろ。ソラコ、何考えて。
Like Soraka be just like, I'm back in control. What the fuck is going on? The eyes of the person who just joined us were slightly teary. Couldn't tell whether it was because they were sharing their senses or because their body was aroused.
こら、やめ。
そういう場合は愛する成田様、どうかお手をお止めになってくださいというのだよ。
誰が言うか。
では仕方あるまい。続けるとしよう。
I was holding her down, so she could easily have escaped if she was serious, but she didn't show that much resistance and surrendered herself to me. This had to be a mannerism maidens used to capture the hearts of men, to traditional Japanese tsundere attitude.
このままされるばかりではつまらないだろう。君も積極的に探求をしてみるといい。
なんか良さそうなセリフでごまかされると思うな。
Alright, I remember what I wanted to put in the fucking description of the last part just now. Just, hallelujah!
こんなことで私が屈すると思ってるのなら。
She placed her lips against mine. Her face looked rosy, her eyes were teary, but she was still trying to keep a straight face. Gave her a charm unlike Sorako's, though they were both Sorako. She appeared reluctant, but her satisfied expression said everything I needed to know. It seemed that it was necessary for us men to be able to tolerate and be gentle with maidens that couldn't be honest with themselves. By the time we calmed down, it was already past dark. Though it was summer, the wind had gotten cold.
誰にも見られなかったかな。
Upon realizing what they'd done, Sorako reddened and hesitantly said that
誰も来なかったとも。
there were cameras around, but that matters little.
だが、この国のことわざには、壁に耳あり、障子に目ありというものがある。室内ですらそうなのだから、外ではどこに目が潜んでいるか想像もつかない。いや、ことスクールに関して言えば、壁に策ありというべきか。こう言い直そう。少なくとも私たちの行為を肉眼で視認できる範囲に人はいなかった。
Frankly, I was still curious why a Japanese saying had vice in it. Did this country have some sort of ties with with that German Jewish surname? Why mention that it's a German Jewish surname and just go for the fact that it's the fucking word for white?
壁に策ありって？
Oh no. It was the cause behind everyone finding out about her relationship. Did Soraka not know that Sokka was listening?
言葉のあやだよ。それよりも今日は貴重な体験ができた。
I've forcefully changed the subject.
それは彼女と。
Probably wouldn't have happened if they weren't both
どう
Soraka.
かしたかね？
Soraka had just calmed down, but she suddenly turned red and looked down again. Our shoulders touched as we enjoyed the chilly night wind. It felt pleasant on our heated bodies. A moment like this, where I had Soraka by my side, was more precious than anything. It was like the twilight, a transient moment that could never last, though that made it all the more special.
どうしたの？
心地よいと思っていただけだよ。
私は別にそうでもない。そうだね。二人でいるとすごく心地いい。
そろそろ寮に戻ろうか。
はい。
We stood up and walked.
そういえば一つ忘れていたのだがね。彼女にも名前が必要ではないかね。
名前？
For a moment, Soraka didn't understand what it
人
meant.
間が家庭というなら、君たち二人がいることこそ空子という家庭だ。どちらが欠けてもそれは違ってしまうのだろう。とはいえどちらも空子では何よりも呼びづらい。人間ならば名前を持つものだよ。
そうだね。今まで名前なんて考えたことなかったけど、成田くんの言うことはわかる。でもどんな名前が？
いいのがなければそうだね。空に響くで終わりの音に字を合わせて己に響くで響きと呼ぼう。
名付けとか恥ずかしいぞ。ありがとう成田くん。
Oh, I'd already registered her as Hibiki. Soroko's eyes were wet with tears of joy. I took her hand and walked out of the dome. Once we returned, we had to take a shower. We had to take a shower together. Taking a shower separately was not an option. After the enjoyable evening, I followed my plans and left early in the morning. Murder time. I passed through the walkway and exited the academy, and for the first time in a while, the peaceful moment had ended and the season of necessary horrors had begun. The climax of the second act was drawing near. The Avenger would rain death and destruction upon the family of his beloved. It was time to ruin Shinzon Katsuragi, Soroka's father, and one of the three remaining targets. I arrived at Okushima and walked around the silent rural town. Upon reaching the church I used as my hideout, I found my loyal maid
お
waiting for
待
me.
ちしておりました、ご主人様。おおよそ4分の遅刻ですね。
スクールからの尾行が思いのほかしつこくてね、巻くのに手間がかかった。多めに見てもらいたい。
つまり筆者が日夜日陰の身で夜鍋に勤しんでいる間、若い女とイチャイチャ遊んでいたという意味ですね。それで遅刻したと。なるほど、よくわかります、成田様。
My maid was as talkative as
尾
ever.
行が女であったかは残念ながらわからない。それよりも現状の報告を聞こう。
それよりも女をもてあそぶ悪い男の定番ゼリフ。ご主人様は日々紳士レベルのアップを欠かしておられないようで。
報告を聞かせてもらおうか。
Listen, I just want the report.
葛城建設絡みの仕込みは全て予定通りです。前回の訪問で葛城屋敷の PC にバックドアを仕込めましたから、 ID やパスワードも抑えることができました。
日本人はセキュリティ意識が低くて助かる。
いくつか面倒な事案には多少荒っぽい手段も使いましたが、事後処理は終わっていますので新山の耳に入ることはないでしょう。金融系にも手を打って新山の逃げ道は塞いであります。 あとは今週中にも。
ところでそれなのだが、菱谷、早速今から始めるとしよ
う。それはまた突然のお話ですね。成田様が突飛なのはいつものことですが、結婚詐欺に合わせた婚約者に正体がバレて窮地に陥ったような請求さで、菱谷びっくりです。
いつもながら菱谷はエスパーのように理解が早い。私は説明が楽でいい。
ご主人様が気楽であろうとも、ネタにマジレスされた方はぶっちゃけ超ドン引きです。
Taigi Mikoto seemed to know my true identity. I acted with extreme caution. Where had I gone wrong?
予言と言ったら君は信じるかな。
Taigi Mikoto, the 7th étoile, had a halo I knew nothing about. Prediction he'd given me on the first day was on the mark. Tamo and Sorako had actually been in the rose garden.
それが大義のハローなのか。
Farsight, or perhaps actual prediction, the ability to see into the future. That was impossible, the HMI. The HMI with that power was like a saint from holy texts, a divine avatar that had no hope of besting.
いや、そこまでの力ではないはずだ。
It was possible to see if it was possible to see the future at will, Shinri Narita's actions would have been exposed a lot earlier. The fact that I'd made it this far was proof that, no matter what Taigi's halo was, it had limits. It also weren't guaranteed that her or I was the one at fault for the revelation, so it was reactions implied that she realized something as well. Regardless, considering Taigi's actions, it was fair to assume he had no damning evidence. He seemed almost sure of it, but almost was not completely. And so there was no time to waste. I had to end the second act sooner than expected.
君たちの行く末に平穏と祝福を。
I recalled the exchange with Taigi yesterday. I didn't know his motives. What was on his mind? Was he truly an enemy?
いや、復讐とはあまりに人間的な狂気。およそ理性あるものなら残らず駆逐を願うだろう。お前は人の心を持つからこそ必ず私の敵になる男。
There was no logic behind it, but that was what I believed. I knew what Taigi used to be like. Taigi Genma was one of the few friends the man formerly known as Shunsui Mikado had in that desolate village. Under normal circumstances, we would have been glad to be reunited. However, Shinri Narita and Taigi Mikado were mortal enemies. One was a man who had returned to enact revenge, while the other was the son of the main target. There was no honest words or friendly handshakes between us. Instead, we had daggers hidden behind our backs.
さらばだ、古きよすがたち。この心の最後に残された鎖を断ち切って、私はなすべきことをなすだろう。
成田様、聞いておられますか？
Oh dear, had that report go? I had let the report go in one ear and out the other.
もちろんだ。続けたまえ。
では、先ほど報告した葛城邸への侵入ルート案についてご意見をお願いします。まあ、良いでしょう。そもそも侵入ルート案の話なんてしていませんでしたが。
私がかつて暗闇の底であの男から聞かされたメイドという存在は、主人に絶対の尊敬と忠誠を誓う世の多くの男どもの羨望の的だったはずなのだが。
医師や優秀な最高級メイドですので、成田様への愛と忠誠は完全無欠に問題ナッシングでございます。ところで、金髪巨乳フェチのご主人様が最近年頃になっている青い目のレディーの件なのですが。
一体どうやって調べたのだね。主人のプライバシーは尊重したまえ。あと一つ言っておくが、私の放漫への愛は生成への信仰であり、フェチズムなどではないのだ。
My assertion was unheard, went unheard.
成田様におかれましては、標的の娘と関係を持つのは万一の手札として有用とはいえ、情が湧いて迷う。
当然だ。私にとってなすべきことは一つ。どうに人の心など、凍てついた復讐者に今さら湧く情のあるはずもない。
一切承知いたしました、ご主人様。
She gave me a respectful, perfectly executed bow. By the time I finished some things I had to take care of myself, such as financial contracts, it was already late in the afternoon. There was something else I had to do that day. I accelerated the plans for the second act. The climax was only a few days out. Just to be sure, I made my way to inspect the Katsuragi Manor again. With Ishia driving the car, it only took 2 hours to reach our destination. We didn't use the path Sorako showed me. We stopped before getting there and broke through the roadless surface of a mountain to finish the trip. Everything went according to plan. We had no need for a path like this. According to the Academy's neurotic security, the Katsuragi man, compared to the Academy's neurotic security, the Katsuragi man was naked. Going through the front door and reaching Shinzon was child's play. However, the world was full of surprises. Even if my experience told me that everything was proceeding perfectly, unexpected trouble could have always arisen. It was how it went when I saved a duke. When I saved the Duke, whatever his name was, from an assassination attempt. Back then, an unexpected thief appeared, making a mess out of the plans of both my enemies and allies. My own decision, in the spur of the moment, saved his life. There was no telling what would happen on the fated day. I had to consider all the possibility, prepare for anything, and have a thorough plan. That was how any first-rate professional operated. Past the slanted forest beyond the manor and approached the main building. Staring down at the curious-looking construct, I quickly realized that security was stronger than it had been during my last visit.
無駄の多い配置であることだ。
この国ではファンピーの方の警備に対する認識はせいぜいこんなものです。
だが以前に比べて増強されているとなると警戒はしなければならない。
問題は増強の理由でございますね。
My loyal maid had a good point. It didn't mean much if Shinzon Katsuragi had decided to improve security on a whim, but he realized that his life was in danger. If someone had warned him.
狙われているのを察したにしては中途半端だ。差し詰め、新山が狙われているかもと警告があった。根拠はないが信用はできるので警戒は強めよう。
There was no meaning in trying to figure out the source. Security as sloppy was no better than having no security at all. So I quickly ran a final check on my infiltration route.
では速やかに戻るとしよ
う。はい。これ以上うろうろしていて、万が一ご主人様が感づかれてしまい、当日に警備を強化されては本末転倒ですので。
私がそんなミスを犯すはずがないではないか。
もちろん、例えばの話でございます。
The moment we melted into the forest, I felt a chin akin to a sharp blade run down my neck.
知れ！
はい！
The moment I shouted that, we ran in opposite directions. The fact that this was a forest saved us. They hadn't seen me yet. In the night, getting spotted was akin to having all my secrets exposed. I ran, jumping from tree to tree, then heard the unmistakable sound of gunshots from behind me. Deadly bullets flew through the air. This was an assault, and the ones responsible were on an entirely different level than the guards at Katsuragi Manor. I felt something pushing down on me from between the dense trees. It was a mechanical, harsh, murderous gaze. Observing my reaction, the gaze displayed nothing aside from a desire to kill. Based on the sounds, that was a 5.56mm assault rifle. Supersonic bullets easily surpassed those from handguns, and they could break even concrete blocks. It was an endless blizzard of gunfire. Visibility was poor in the area, but the shapeless assailants seemed to know my exact location. Kept at bay by the obscenely accurate bullets, I couldn't find a way to get close. Giving up on closing the distance, I hid behind the old growth and used the breathing methods of Geb to erase my presence. aim was inhuman, I was certain they had no means to trace me if I put all my effort into hiding. Sure enough, they eased up on the gunfire. Looked to my left, where I saw Hishiya hiding behind the growth of a few trees.
時にヒシヤ、そちらからお客人の姿が見えるかね。
見つけました。ざっと60メートル。
The distance great enough to make my head hurt. Approaching shooters that far away, unarmed, and was akin to rushing through the gates of hell. One of the fucking maids. I also caught a glimpse of a dark silhouette amidst the trees. It sped through the rough terrain like a gale, making it reminiscent of the black dogs of ill omen from British legends.
ヒシヤの同類のよう。
An apron dress with a short skirt, a charming ribbon on the chest, and a petite appearance reminiscent of a young girl. Not only was it a devilish appearance, but she seemed like a true maid. Not just any maid, either. It was this very same one who always accompanied Taigi. What a distasteful joke. Maids were meant to serve their masters. Sending them on assassination missions on their own was the absolute height of insanity.
当たり前ですが、ヒシヤン、面識はありませんので。
こちらに心当たりがある。スクールの関係者だ。教室で会った時にはこんな戦力の持ち主だという気配はなかったが。
Armed maid was akin to a man-eating tiger. She had an assault rifle in her right hand and a sawed-off shotgun in the left. A kit that made her perfect to mid to close-range combat. It also meant that this petite maid had managed to corner us using a rifle with only one hand. Even though the assault rifle was designed to be wielded with both hands, she burst-fired it with the accuracy of a sniper rifle while simultaneously running through the forest with the speed of a tiger mid-hunt. His power was inhuman.
考え事にふけっている暇はなさそうだ。
Head behind cover to avoid the bullets from the assault rifle. But my maid was not only demonic in her power, she also had the training to go with it. No bullets were wasted. She didn't approach without a good reason. She realized that we were as good as unarmed and kept her advantageous position.
こちらの姿はまだ見られてはいないな。
メイドの主に正体を連絡されれば、ご主人様が一挙に大ピンチというところですね。
Even if we made it out of there, that was a good deed. We were as good as dead if my identity was exposed. Had to either hide or run away, or overcome the extreme disparity in firepower and terminate her.
なんともしつけに手のかかるメイドだね。私の趣味ではないのだが。
反抗的なレディーを従順にいたすのが男の誇りだと信じている御人は多いものでございますから。葛城の屋敷には動きがありません。あのメイド様はあちらの警備連中とはつながってないようです。
この状況で多少でも良い知らせは心の潤いだ。
Hisha was right, nothing had changed in the mansion down the slope. Though if we continued our battle, it was only a matter of time before they noticed. Sooner or later, they would realize what was going on, and we'd be surrounded.
ヒヤ、手持ちに武器になりそうなものはあるかね。
メイドのたしなみとして少々だけ持ち合わせが。
ヒヤ、君はいつでも完璧だな。
I reassessed our opponent's combat potential. Assault rifles were originally infantry weapons meant to be used in close encounters. The anti-range and power that came with using rifle bullets, as well as the ability to rapid fire, making them useful for suppression as well. That maid was using a military rifle called a FAMAS. He used 5.56mm NATO bullets, had 25 of them per magazine. Could switch between 3 modes: single, auto-fire, and 3-round burst. It was originally created in Saint-Étienne, France. It was notable for incorporating the bullpup style into its form. The bullpup style put the gun's action and magazine behind the grip, making it shorter than other guns and thereby easier to use for smaller people like the maid. The sawed-off shotgun was a modified shotgun with its front, well, sawed off. Reduced the range, but increased the buckshot spread. It was nearly impossible to dodge from up close. That was the distance that it was meant for. Bullets bit into the nearby trees. Fuck. They certainly weren't a good defense. They certainly weren't a good defense against rifle ammo. Based on the sound, the enemy had stopped moving. Perhaps she had settled to focus on picking us up off from a distance. It could have been a trick of some sorts as well. Letting your guard down against someone so well trained was a death sentence.
さて、どちらから先に行くかね。
フィシアなら死の危険があるおとりに愛らしいメイドを使うような作戦は決して立てません。
うん。始める前に一つ作戦が潰れたな。
What I had on me were a ballpoint pen and my student ID, two things all school students should have, as well as a folding pocket knife, one thing any gentleman should have. Ah, my fucking hands are cold. Why am I down here without my jacket? I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. The knife I had, due to its versatility and usefulness, but in all. The knife I had, due to its versatility and usefulness, but in all honesty, I would have preferred it a blunt weapon of some sort.
我々が襲撃者を排除するには必要なことがある。
二手に分かれて行動することですね。万が一、成田様が撃たれてのたれ死んでも、その隙にフィシアは逃げることができます。
私に弾は当たらないから安心したまえ。
この後に及んで、なんたるずぶとい神経。頼もしいを通り越して失笑です。では、参ります。
We split and headed in the opposite directions. Hishia went left while I went right. Our mouths, steps, clothes, noses, nothing released a single sound. We moved as fast as we could while silencing our steps and slipped through the gaps in the dense forest. Having lost track of us, the maid stopped firing, making the area so quiet that you could hear the birds sing through the shaded midday forest. No one would believe that this had been the spot of an intense life-or-death battle mere moments ago. It was the calm before the storm, and considering the difference in firepower, the storm would end in a moment. Under the curtain of silence, I searched for the remnants of the maid's presence, the sensation of her hostile gaze. He rushed out, rustling the leaves. The very same second, I heard a 3-round burst. To her, the shot was not meant to finish me off, but to gauge the distance. It was obvious what would come next. 4 bursts. Mechanical, murderous, and calculated. The maid was now 30 meters away. Far too big a gap for a knife, but to a rifle it was nothing. Superhuman maid fired 5.56mm bullets that traveled at twice the speed of sound. Rating the dozen deadly shots was nearly impossible. However, the bullets strayed from the path.
成田家のメイドのたしなみ、9ミリ弾でございます。
While I distracted the maid, Hishia approached close enough to fire and spun as if doing a dance move. Her long skirt fluttered and, as by magic, revealed an M11 submachine gun.
本日は持ち合わせも少なくお恥ずかしい限りですが、どうかお楽しみくださいませ。
Fucking pumper full of lead! I don't expect that there won't be a CG this part. But hey, I just kind of feel like fucking taking a screenshot. Whoops. She fired all 32 bullets in just a few seconds before smoothly replacing the magazine and starting all over again. The metal torrent was too much even for the superhuman maid, so it pinned her to one spot.
シアのマジカルスカートはいつでも便利なものだ。
I jumped out from behind the tree before even checking if Hishia was successful, and ran as fast as possible to close the 30-meter rift between us. Being the shortest distance and running straight towards the maid was the epitome of recklessness. It made me an absurdly easy target. However, that was exactly what I did. After all, I knew it was done the very moment Hishia failed to keep the maid in check and got hit by a stray bullet. The maid wouldn't just open a hole in me, she'd split me apart and I looked as pathetic as a crushed watermelon. That meant that the foolish, outrageous charge was the only way to approach and defeat the enemy.
ここだ。
Our ranges and damage potentials were on different levels. I had no chance of winning in any other way, so I focused on closing the distance as quickly as possible.
成田様
The maid in black was fearsome indeed. Despite the hectic situation, she realized I wasn't the crux of this attack and instantly fired in my general direction to keep me at bay.
どうかお休みくださいませ
Hishia's precise support granted me a precious few seconds, which were enough for me to cross the 30 meters. I reached the hiding maid at last. When I did, I instantly slashed at her neck with my hand. However, she used Famas' frame like a sword to deflect it. The clash between knife and gun ended in the knife's victory, and my high-speed hand made the gun fly up into the air. While the gun was still in midair, the girl jumped from tree to tree and moved upward. The maid jumped from tree to tree and moved upward. That maneuver was entirely outside the realm of human ability. It was something that could only be performed by those who ignored and broke the laws of gravity, inertia, and limits of human muscles. It truly felt as though I was looking at a man-eating beast hiding in the forest, where technique and physical strength involved were downright inhuman. Chased after the maid, seemingly ignoring gravity as I ran up the trees. This power of mine, which allowed me to match the dominant inhuman being, was merely human skill. They were the murderous techniques of a distant foreign land taught to Shinri Narita by the man who had brought him back to life 7 years ago. There was a discord in her movements. She was probably hurt. A barrage of bullets from Hishia's gun must have done some damage. The sprightly flew away. She jumped from branch to branch, made me think of the lords of the forest in movies. I commended her ability to move like that with a 9mm wound in her, but even if she could endure the pain, there was no way for her to avoid the general decrease in physical ability. Took advantage of a condition and threw my knife at her back as hard as I could. The blade flew towards us, though attracted by magnetism. It would have been fatal even if it hit, but I was certain it would decrease her performance. Seeing that I was about to end things, I bent my knee to prepare for the next jump, but then I saw something unbelievable. Something fell from above and blocked the knife. It was the Famas rifle I'd thrown into the air. As I jumped, it bounced off the branch that she'd just bent. Basically, it came from directly ahead, and its trajectory matched that of the maid's. Had you calculated this, or was this a result of extreme battle instincts? It was already in the air, so I had no means of evasion. The man grabbed the Famas and fired a single burst at me. I was as good as dead.
Ninja というものか
As I was overcome with shock, Hishia waved her hand in a no motion. Reddy soon caught up to my prediction. She jumped with power that made it hard to believe she was hurt and rushed towards the gun. Now the gun was right between us. The battle wasn't over yet. Preparing my next move, I gauged how close we were and which one of us would reach the gun first. In terms of pure jumping speed, the maid far outstripped me, meaning that Shinri Narita had no chance of getting to it first. She would take the gun a split second before I could. Before the fated moment arrived, I swung my left arm. An ace up my sleeve I contained within it. The ballpoint pen closed the distance. In a matter of moments, the Famas was blown away again. Saw a black barrel before me. It was a sawed-off shotgun in her left hand, her final attack. Buckshot scattered in a circle the moment the gun was fired and showered its target in metal, making it lethal for anyone without armor. To dodge it, in my situation, I had to fly like a hero from a comic, which was impossible, and I knew I couldn't count on Hishia to support me either. There was a cold glint in the maid's eyes, the only thing I could do in the moment before she pulled the trigger. I unleashed a surprise attack. I went and threw the throwing weapon I couldn't have possibly have had. Ballpoint pen. I cut through the wind and hit her straight in the brow. Stationary, it wasn't made to be thrown like throwing weapons, or better used as secret weapons in bullfights. Though given enough speed, the sharp end could fulfill the role of a weapon. A potentially deadly weapon at that. Throwing stones have been a powerful weapon since the ancient times. Accessibility and range alone made them effective. There were even cases of them causing serious damage in recent times, and some theorize that stones killed more people than not just blades, but arrows as well. The maid bled from her brow, and her position shook. The unstoppable killing machine showed a small but lethal opening. It didn't give her the time to restore her broken balance. Did I just, like, accidentally pick the right choice, or were all choices gonna lead here? Below us, Hisha joined her hands together in prayer.
Amen.
Grabbed the baggy maid's uniform to prepare to finish her off. But a certain sense of deja vu slowed me down. The moment I caught her, I threw her down to the ground. The move was almost certain to kill her, so I thought, but a moment of hesitation had prevented that inevitable conclusion. I had hesitated. I knew for a while that the devil known as fate would never ignore a mistake like that. After crashing into the ground, the half-dead maid jumped up to her feet like clockwork. Her stance appeared completely unnatural. Despite being damaged so badly that it was strange that she was still alive, she continued the battle, moving in a manner reminiscent of a poorly oiled machine. The shotgun's barrel was raised towards the target. The dangerous weapon was fixed right at me. There was no need for precise aim. For old people like myself, a single piece of buckshot was enough to be a serious bleeding injury that impaired movement. The gap between us widened. I had no chance against her. She could have made short work of us. I wasn't in a position to evade, and she was too far from me to close the distance. Was that how my life came to an end? Was I fated to die before even getting close to fulfilling my role? Unacceptable. I knew I couldn't die here. If I withered with that grudge and hatred still in me, I'd be trampled on. All I'd trampled on would have been in vain. I did not deserve such a simple end. I had to complete what I'd set out to do, and to send a solemn prayer out to my parents, sister, to all those who died that day 7 years ago. My end was inevitable, yet I still rejected the idea of giving up. The maid started to pull the trigger. With the weapon scattered death, something appeared in front of the gun.
Narita-sama.
Hisha!
Did Hisha just fucking die? It was Hisha. Putting herself in the line of fire, she extended her hand to the muzzle and sacrificed her arm to the buckshot. Though I was pathetic enough to have my maid take a shot from me, I wasn't enough of a fool to just wait for a second shot. When I closed in on her, I pushed the gun away. The moment the second shot stopped being a threat, a strange pressure weighed down on my heart. The shotgun in the maid's hand spun as fast as a cheerleader's baton. It became a blunt weapon that sailed straight towards my chin. I knew that looking away from it for even a moment spelled doom, so I didn't. Fortunately, she managed to use the gun the proper way. It seemed like a new style of martial arts that mixed CQC and gunplay. The maid moved skillfully despite the damage on her body. It seemed like an immortal beast. She must have known that firing it from up close would put her in danger, but she didn't seem to fear it whatsoever, like a true killing machine. Blocked her left hand, which was holding the gun, and grabbed her wrist to push it away. Then I blocked an attack from her right before it reached me, and kicked her with my sideways knee. If I failed to block it even once, it was all over. She planned to die and take me out with her. Buckshot had turned into a kamikaze attack. The maid's left wrist sliced towards me like a blade. I avoided it by pushing her shoulder. Sharp kick she launched towards my lower leg. I blocked with a kick of my own. Then evaded an attack from the spinning shotgun and directed it downwards. And after that, I twisted her body, but it wasn't enough for me to avoid the burst at my side. I failed to dodge the wall, so a single piece of buckshot bit into my side. Ignoring the pain, I took a step forward and pushed the maid's shoulders to make her lose her balance. I grabbed her clothes, lowered myself, and threw her. The maid's body spun through the air. She crashed headfirst into the ground. A dull, unpleasant sound.
Hisha, 傷は
大丈夫とはいきませんが、今回もこの特殊ケプラー製防弾メイド服のおかげで助かりました。 これくらいなら適切な処置を施せば治るでしょう。
Hisha spoke while holding onto her bloody right hand.
成田様こそお怪我は？
私はかすり傷だ。
My mistake had harmed Hishia. Even with the maid uniform had protected her. She took a shotgun blast to an arm. She had to be treated immediately. However, there was something I had to confirm first. I looked down at the silent maid. She didn't have anything notable besides the weapons.
やはり大義が連れていたメイドの一人か。ここに現れたのは。
The whole situation made no sense. If Taiga truly knew Shinri Naita's true identity, he must have had better ways of dealing with me. Had he simply dispatched her to this location because he thought Shinzon was a target? A maid like this could easily have handled a dozen standard bodyguards. I didn't know if Shinzon Katsuragi was worth protecting, but it was hard to call this dispatchment lacking. No matter how long I spent thinking, it became harder and harder to know, for me to make sense of Taiga's action.
何を考えている大義。
成田様、ここは撤退しましょう。
それはもしかすると袋のモルモットの間違いではないのかね。
これは失礼いたしました。
Katsuragi Manor was astir. That made sense since they'd heard the gunfire. Knew that would make Shinzon up his security yet again, but it didn't really matter.
急いでこの場を離れるのは賛成だな。まずは隠れ家に戻り、お前の手当てをしよう。
いえ、奥島に戻りましたら、成田様はそのまま学園へお戻りください。余計な時間を取れば、いよいよ怪しまれるでしょう。
As long as I'd known her, Ishii was the type of woman who'd never back down. Her stubbornness reminded me of a certain girl from the academy, which made me crack a
こん
smile.
な時に笑われると、ぶっちゃけムカつきます。ヒシア、これほど怪我をしているというのに。
いや何、君が完璧なメイドで助かるという話だよ。
では今後は待ち合わせに遅刻なしでお願いします。
心がけよう。
I would have preferred to dispose of the remains, but we had no
今日は
time.
ご苦労だった。シア。
はい。
元の綺麗な手に直してくれ。
はい。
We simply left the place from which we could look down upon the riotous mansion. We silently, not simply. I'm fucking retarded. At parting ways with Hisha, I returned to the academy.
わーひと。いとねー。たらーた。
Focusing my strength on my stomach, I used the breathing of Geb to stabilize my mental
ア
state.
ルバー。アムサー。スイッタ。
Many unexpected things had happened at Katsuragi Manor, but I made sure Shinri Naita's face showed none of my inner turmoil. It was before dinner time. There was no one in the living room. Everyone had probably retreated to their own rooms. Osaka might have been clearing her mind at the gym, while Tomo had been particularly late recently, so she might have been elsewhere too. I walked around my room to find Soraka standing in front of it. Toward my room to find Soraka standing in front of it.
成田君。
ただいま、ソラコ。君が部屋の前にいるということは、私に何か用かね。
I asked her with a plain expression, and she looked at the entrance of the room.
まだ帰ってきてないみたいだったから、心配に。
She closed her eyes a bit and gave me a bashful smile.
怪我してる？制服に血がついてるけど、可能したら大変だよ。僕が薬塗ってあげる。
Not asking anything more, Soraka took me by the hand and opened the door to my room. Unable to chase her away, I just let her treat me. Just like during our first night, we sat facing each other. After she took off my upper clothing, I heard her gasp. I'd just returned from a deadly battle. Besides the side that'd been damaged from the buckshots, there were marks from blunt trauma and grazes.
これは手当てするから動かないでね。
Soraka asked no questions. The air felt so dense that it was hard to breathe. The hand treating me stopped on a certain area on my back.
昨べも思ったんだけど、成田くんの体よく見ると古傷がたくさんあるよね。
That was exactly that. Wounds were a sign of progress, proud records of things the body or the mind had gone through. All the wounds on Shinrin Narita were 7 years worth of steps leading to his grand stage of revenge. The fingers on my back traced a few other
こっ
wounds.
ちとこの傷が一番古いね。
Couldn't see what wounds they were, but for all I knew, they were wounds from before I became Shinrin Narita. She may have remembered them, and
7年前、お父さんは何をしたの？
through much effort, Sorako-Katsuragi rang out those words. Slowly turned around. She was facing down at first, but then looked at me with eyes so full of emotion that I assumed she would break down crying any moment. I knew that this decisive moment would arrive, but now that it had, I didn't even know what to say. Fatigue had dulled my mind, and when it finally began working again, I spoke the foremost thought in my mind.
聞かれているかもしれない。
Wary of eavesdropping, I whispered that into her ear. It was hard to comprehend, but Sorako did. Instead of saying anything, she merely nodded. She understood that someone might be listening in on us, and that I was about to say, that what I was about to say couldn't be heard by anyone else.
成田くんは知ってるんだよね。
She understood my intentions clearly, so she asked for the truth in indefinite terms.
それは私は
It seemed she'd figured out my true identity.
それはさっき廊下で。
見えたのかね。
はい。
She nodded, confirming that she was now certain of who I was. Sorako's halo had certainly advanced. She was now able to see Shinrin Narita's wound clearly. Considering who she was must have understood at first glance. However, she didn't seem too surprised. Was that because she had predicted it already? Had she guessed who I was and what she saw within my wound?
本当は初めて会った時からずっとそうじゃないかって思ってた。
いつか来るのだと分かっていたが、こうしていざとなると困ったものだね。足が震えているよ。
あの夜何があったの？
Soraka asked that with all the intensity she could muster. She was biting her lips and clenching her fists so tightly that they turned pale. But that night she obviously meant the one where the Mikado collapsed 7 years ago. Golden flames rained down. Loud, annoying crackling resounded. Many people were on the ground, but none of them moved. The sparks danced within the orange backlight. Something humanoid stood there. The scene had been burned into my eyes. Never left them once over the past 7 years.
知らなければそれで済むこともよ。
I never intended to talk about it. It was good that you didn't know. She wouldn't have to hurt or hesitate.
済むわけないじゃない。だって僕には見えるんだから。
She smiled with tears in her eyes. It was an expression of pain. Her halo let her see the people's wounds. Soraka didn't have the option to remain clueless even if she wanted to. It was part of what made her Sorako-Katsuragi. Her world was such that she had to conclude people were never alive to begin with. It was a perspective that no one, no matter how close to her they were, could fully understand. It was beyond even me, and I was her lover.
だから教えて。お父さんは何をしたの？だから成田くんはスクールへ来たの？
そうだ。私はそのために帰ってきた。あの日からずっと続いている舞台にふさわしい結末を与え。
でもそんなの
他に道はない。いや、あるのだろうが、私はそれを選べない。この愚かな舞台を最後まで演じきる。
Seeing my determination, Sorako gave in and closed her
お
eyes.
父さんたちがそうなんだね。
そうだ。
After a moment of hesitation, I resolutely spoke up.
どうしてそんなこと？
理由を問いかけても意味はないのだよ。たとえ世界と引き換えだったとしても、 行いはなされた。ならば見合うフィナーレを与えなければならない。私にとって過去のすべてに決着をつけない限り、新しい舞台は始まらないのだから。
そんな。
She added a couple of meaningless words, then trailed off entirely. Sorako Katsuragi knew the truth. She knew that all the suspicions she'd had before were true. And she was hesitating. Sorako was an extremely considerate woman, so she couldn't discard the past. But the memories of those days and the sin that ended them. However, her own father was one of the people responsible for that tragedy. Just like how she couldn't forget Shinsui Mikoto, she couldn't tolerate Shinzon Katsuragi being killed. Despite how he was, she loved her father. Now, if only the heart was made of steel. Surely wouldn't have hurt then. She couldn't bring herself to stop Shinri Narita's revenge or abandon Shinzon Katsuragi. My appearance had only made her sadder. She should have never entered her life. Was it a mistake for an Avenger to seek peace? Was it a mistake to feel joy when spending time with her? Shinri Narita would fulfill his oath. Then again, I'd known all along that this time would come. Come it had.
僕、どうしたら
At the very least, I want to sound as gentle as I could.
私は自分のやるべきことをためらわない。君も自分が思うことをなせばいい。
I gave her a resolute response. She came after my life to protect her father, so be it. I've chosen the path of the Avenger on my own. That meant I had to accept Sorako's decision as well. I would do what I had to, and if someone barred my path, I would remove them. Everyone had the right to seek happiness. Sorako too had to do what she thought best.
そんなの。
She raised her shaking hand, put it in her pocket, and touched the case containing the glasses. She then bit her lips and pulled her hand away, choosing not to rely on Hibiki. After that, she fell completely silent. Of course she did. The truth was far too heavy. She needed time to think at least. And with that, there was nothing more that Shinri Narita could do for her.
Sorako, 今日はもう帰りたまえ。
Her words made her look up at me, but she didn't say anything in response. Soraka walked out, leaving only the after-image of her hanging her head and shaking behind. After that, a silence as heavy and unpleasant as mud reigned. I decided not to hold a grudge, no matter what she chose. Shinri Narita would simply follow through with the decision he'd made long ago. Once they finished talking, Soraka ran outside instead of returning to her room. She couldn't stay in one place, especially not the dorm. The mere thought that it was so close was too much for her. She found herself at the school building. Looking at the window, she saw a reflection of a girl who looked ready to die.
どうしたらいいんだろう。
The person in the reflection looked as though bored. The real Soraka wasn't wearing glasses, but the Soraka in the reflection was. Obviously, it was just her mental image. Someone walked by and looked at it. They would have seen a perfect reflection of her current form.
あいつも言っただろう。自分で決めたらいいんじゃないか。お父さんたちが何をしたのか。やっとわかった。とても悲しいけど、それでも僕には恨めないよ。
Back in Shinri's room, she tried to let Hibiki take charge, to run away from the heavy burden. However, she'd stopped herself because even though Sorako and Hibiki were one, they were not the same. She couldn't run. Sorako was certain that she had to face the truth about what happened 7 years ago by herself.
7年前の出来事なんてのは、私には他人事だ。だから、こうして冷静に話ができる。だけど、Sorakoは違う。なのにそんなことを言う。私が言うのはなんだが、Sorakoは相当おかしい。怒りというのは執着の裏返しだ。それは人間としてあるべき心の機能なんだ。 自己の存在を守る防衛機能だと言ってもいい。空子の場合、怒りや憎しみを理性で押さえつけているわけじゃない。そういう回路が外れているみたいに、そもそも感情が生成されていないんだ。楽しいことはいくらでもあるよ。大事なものもちゃんとある。やっぱりおかしいな。自分で分かっていない分だけ危ういにも程がある。空子の親はあんな連中だ。くたばっても当然なのに、空子はそれでも恩に来てる。お前はずっとそうだ。あれだけの目に合わされたのに。
Hibiki, just listen. Like, I know the decision is up to you. I'm just saying that if it was up to me, I'd fucking shoot them before him. Soraka was used to hearing her say things like that. Hibiki had cheered Sorako up and given her the power to go on many times before. This time it wasn't that easy.
考えるのが辛いなら、道理に任せてみるのはどうだ？私たちの社会では、正当な理由があっても、復讐は許されない。独善だからな。それじゃあ、お父さんたちがしたことは悪いことだよ、当然。だけど、善悪の判断は個人の仕事じゃないんだ。法の致すところってやつだ。
In a way, that was the right conclusion, but Sorako didn't nod. Not because she loved Shinri Narita. There was something else coiling around her heart. Back then, like when Narita had saved her from the explosion after she'd accepted her death, the one thing on her mind was surfacing emotion. Something deep inside that she hadn't wanted to face had reared its head.
響ちゃんは、どうしたい？私に聞くなよ。私は、いや、私にとってあの連中は、どうでもいいんだよ。このスクールに通ってくる他の連中。面識のない大勢の学生たち。
Sorako looked outside. In the dim evening light, she saw the gymnasium, which had its lights on. There were surely many students there indulging in sports or relaxation.
そういった連中と、何も変わりのない存在だよ。親じゃないし、恩もない。どうしたいかと言われたら、あいつの味方をしてもいい。それも、別にやりたいわけじゃない。どうでもいいからな、他人のことなんて。他人じゃないのは、空子だけだ。僕たちは、違うよ。どうしても、そうは思えないけどね。もっと、わがまま言っていいよ。体は一つしかないけど、これは、僕たち二人のものなんだから。
Like, yes, it's sweet and all, but it feels more and more like, you should be more selfless, we have one body. It feels like she wants to, like, give up decision. Like, you just take over, I'm too fucking scared to make decisions.
空子こそ、もっと好きにやればいいのに。だいたい今は、他人のフォローをしてる状況じゃないだろ。気遣いすぎだよ。気遣いすぎだよ。
Two, were as one, spoke the exact same thing. In reality, she muttered that to herself, but Soraka heard two voices. Mary let out a wry grin. He was right. There was no time to worry about. This was no time to worry about someone else. As Soraka stood there, she heard the sound of footsteps. She turned around as her heart pounded with expectation.
まだ残っていたのですか、桂木さん。
Instead of who she expected, she saw Tokino and Yomise. Soraka must have looked pretty bad since Tokino instantly took her to her compartment. Tokino presented Soraka with some fresh tea, a reflection of Tokino's taste. It wasn't tea from a tea bag, but real black tea.
悩み事でもあるのですか？
いえ。
Soraka didn't say anything. Any details would have to expose Narita's secret.
言えないというのなら、それでも構いません。
Soraka was clearly hiding something, but Tokino didn't ask. Giving her tea out of consideration, she resumed talking.
よく聞いてください、空子。あなたには次に選ばれる資格があります。
The next what? Trying to understand those roundabout words was like grabbing clouds. The very idea that she'd been chosen for something felt so vague to her that she couldn't accept it.
今はまだ多くを語れませんが、自信を持ちなさい。たどり着けるのは策ではなく自分なのだと。
そんな資格僕にあるわけが。
あります。私は信じている。あなたはあなたの望むものを手に入れていいのよ。
The emotionless scholar with supreme self-restraint made an expression Soraka had never seen on her before. There was no theory or calculation in it, only unconditional trust. It was something she'd never received during her 7 years in Katsuragi Manor. It didn't suit a person like you, Tokino Yomi says. This was clearly an expression of love. Her words slowly spread throughout Sorako's body. Not knowing what to do, she merely closed her eyes in an attempt to calm down. When she opened them again, the simple room, despite not having changed at all, felt completely
あ
different.
なたには随分と辛い思いをさせてしまった。悔いたこともあります。でもあなたはここまで来てくれた。エトワールとして。
Like at first I thought maybe Tokino was also part of that 7 year ago plot. But I'm starting to feel like she's like a new part to this. And she's not entirely aware of what's going on with Kurofune. She almost feels like a bit too nice under the calculating science woman facade.
だから迷わないでソラコ。あなたなら
I may
き
be
っとた
wrong
どり着け
though.
る。すべてを手に入れられる。あな
報われる。
ええ、策に打ち勝って次の資格を得れば必ず。
I take it back.
だから今は小さな感情に自分を見失ってはいけません。本当に大切なことが何なのか正しく判断してなすべきことをなしなさい。
Soraka didn't remember what Tokino said next. After she finished speaking her mind, Tokino let Sorako go. She wasn't certain if her words had helped the girl deal with her troubles. However, a moment later, she mulled over such thoughts, an icon indicating the arrival of a visitor popped up in her vision.
失礼しま
As
す
she mulled over
時野
the
先
thoughts.
生。
It was Migo Tatagi. Like always, he looked like a withered old man. In less than a second, Tokino returned to her usual
2号
self.
がロストしたそうだな。
回収して今戻ったばかりです。
His emotionless response made Tokino feel an impossibly slight bit of discomfort. Like his father, he had little vigor and always seemed disinterested in the world. But just now, Tokino saw an emotion that felt entirely unlike
今
him.
の
It seemed much like the dejection of someone who'd lost their lover.
遺体を見よう。
Remembering her job, she discarded that worthless bit of sentiment. There was a petite maid on the surgical table. She looked no different from the others, but this was number 2.
頭部を破壊されたのがおそらく死因だろう。他には重装か。しかし信じられんな。SSD だぞ。重火器装備の部隊でもいなければ制圧は不可能だ。
事実ですよ先生。モニターが途絶して僕が駆けつけた時にはすでに。
今回2号を出したのは君の指示だ。帝大義。一体何があった？
気になることがあったので念のために言ってもらいました。予想が当たってしまい。
相手の見当は？
わかりません。現場を見た限りでは少数だと思います。調査中ですので何か分かればご連絡します。ただ SSD を排除できるとなるとどこかの偉い先生方が1枚噛んでいてもおかしくありませんね。最近文科省が何やらやっているともっぱらの噂ですし。
政府も一枚岩ではないからな。理事長のやり方が気に入らない人間も大勢いる。
それで時野先生を。
遺体は解剖に回す。
結構です。
Tsukino opened up an icon in her vision and contacted another department. Taigi called out to her.
ところで時野先生、この部屋の前で空子と会いましたが何か話を？
ただの進路相談だ。私はこれでも教師だからな。
When Tokino left the room to prepare for the analysis, Taigi faced her remains on the surgical table.
かわいそうに。
He looked awful. His maid uniform had been torn.
君は美しい。
Wounds all over were deep, and his head had been completely warped.
おやすみ。
That's
ゆ
a
っく
dude.
り眠るといい。
Tiggy leaned in to plant a light kiss on the bloody lips. That's kind of weird. Soraka walked towards the dorm. After leaving the hallway, she went down the large stairs linking the school buildings to the next one. The sun had already set. Looking at the time, she realized that she'd missed out on dinner. She didn't feel like going to the cafeteria, so she decided to just make something once she reached the dorm. Inside, she saw the glass wall of the school building. Sorako strode forward, joining her hands behind her while her image on it
それ
followed.
でどうするんだ？決めたんだろ？
Reflection faced her.
決めた。
She looked down from the stairs and saw the garden, as well as the forest behind it. Though the rose garden she and Noddy walked through last night couldn't be seen from there. School building, halls, dorms, cafeteria, the ballroom, the gymnasium. They were a memorable place for her, to a girl like Sorako, who knew nothing. Everything she'd learned and experienced at the academy had been new. When she first enrolled, Sorako didn't know what to do. HMIs had halos in common, but many were wary of newcomers exactly because they didn't know what powers they had. And Soroko's halo was particularly dangerous. The world Sorako saw was no different than outside. It was all the same to her. She didn't know where to turn. The one who pulled her out of that state, practically by force, was Saku.
あなた、テニスできる？
Saku took her to the court in the facilities building. She'd never played tennis before and was awful at it, but strangely enough, she enjoyed it. It was the beginning of their friendship.
僕、ここに来て幸せだったよ。
As she walked down the stairs, various memories resurfaced in her mind. Saku and Soroko had been here since the start. Then came Eru, Mituri, and Tomo in that order. She was alone within those worlds. There was no end to the heartwarming memories she'd made here. There was Tokino too. She was nobody, but then got chosen as a crown. Soroko could never forget the laughs, spats, and cries she and many other students had shared. She convinced herself that she'd found a lot of things at the academy. Her life had a lot of hardship, but it contained bliss as well. At the Mikado home, her late mother, she even held a grudge against her father and stepmother. Most importantly, Soroko had Hibiki. The pain she'd felt in her heart as she looked back at all the good times was one she'd never experienced before. Soroko had felt sadness and hardship 7 years ago too. At night, she'd suddenly lost everything, and at a sudden complete loss, she really took in the sadness and pain and concealed it. Things were different now.
ごめんなさい。
Soraka uttered an honest apology. She would soon abandon all the things she'd been given, all the expectations placed on her, all the love she'd been granted in exchange for just one thing. She felt that it was an extremely sinful decision. So when Soraka finally returned to the dorm, it was already way past dinner time. Obviously, no one remained in the living room.
静かだな。
As she got lost in sentiment, someone walked down the stairs. Realizing who it was from the rhythm of their steps, Soraka turned around and saw Saku.
サク。
夜店時のから何か聞いた？
Suddenly, Sorako's hair stood on end. For a moment, she couldn't even process the question.
サク。もしかしたら聞いてた？
It was unthinkable under normal circumstances. Tokino's room was completely soundproof, and Sorako and Tokino were the only ones inside there. Sorako knew wasn't the kind of person who used her halo in such a wicked manner. However, though she had no reason to believe it, Sorako felt certain that Saku had eavesdropped on them.
サク。何か勘違い？
Sorako thought she had to say something, but her tongue froze as though paralyzed. Tokino had told Sorako to defeat Saku. She'd heard that it might have unsettled her. That's when she felt she had to apologize. Before she had the chance, Saku grabbed Sorako's arm. Saku was staring at her from a point-blank range, close enough for a kiss. Her smile looked the same as ever, but it didn't feel that way. It was familiar but unnatural. The sight was so unsettling that Sorako felt like she was looking at a creature that merely wore Saku's face. Saku's fingers bit into her skin, making it go pale to red, from pale to red.
痛いよ、サク。
どうするの？
どうする？
Soraka was wedged between Saku's sudden action and the secret contained within her, which made it hard for her to form a proper response.
次なんて、僕はどういうものなのかわからないし、そんなの望んでないよ。
Her answer seemed almost incoherent, but it was good enough for Saku to let her go. The fingers left a mark on Sorako's skin and a pain that seemed to reach the bone seared through her arm. When Sorako placed her hands on the mark, Saku walked by her in a way that made their shoulders touch.
そう。
Those cold words were all she said as she passed by.
サク。
Still rubbing her arms, Sorako listened as Saku's steps grew more distant. She used her non-injured hand to reach into her pocket and take out the glasses she put on.
サクに何も言わなくていいのか？うん、いいよ。僕決めたんだ。響ちゃんはどう？
Sorako asked her that question, but she didn't press Hibiki for a response. She merely gathered her thoughts and the thoughts of the two minds within and hardened her resolve. Sorako lightly apologized to Saku's fading back.
ごめんなさい。
Then she removed her glasses and placed them back in their case. Suddenly Saku's just back. Bitch, I heard. A few days ago, Shinzon Katsuragi had been warned that someone was after his life. The informant was one Taigi Mikado. He was Kurofune's son, making him the child of his co-conspirator, as well as a strange, creepy brat. Normally, Shinzon would have laughed off the words of a mere student. However, for better or worse, he knew full well that Taigi was no mere student. For the past few years, Taigi Mikado's warnings had saved him from a tough spot, or helped him make a tidy sum many times. His words will always seem to predict the future. Taigi attended his father's school, which made him an inhuman monster, but still he was a useful monster. Shinzon had listened to the warning and increased his security detail. According to Taigi, he didn't know who the assailant was, but he did know that a man named Takeshi Hanazono had already died by his hand, and that Shinzon Katsuragi was the next on his list. Takeshi Hanazono. Hearing that name that almost slipped his mind made a chill run down his spine. Hanazono, much like Shinzon, a dog of the late Mikado clan. After they were wiped out, he worked under Kurofune, but one mistake, too many, had led to his downfall. Takeshi had once visited Shinzon, but he shooed him away at the front door. He had no patience for a reunion. Shinzon had assumed Hanazono had died a long time ago, so the fact that he'd remained alive was a surprise by itself. However, now Shinzon had learned that he'd been murdered by someone who wished to do the same to him. He attempted to drown his fear in his most treasured whiskey. Glass emptied right away, and he went straight for a refill. He'd been drinking since morning, and was now far past his limit. Who could be after his life? He had too many enemies to even guess. However, if it was someone who held a grudge against both Shinzon and Takeshi's Hanazono. Slightly drunk, he vehemently denied the possibility. He'd watched the worthless mansion burn down with his own two eyes. The Mikados had been on the chopping block to begin with. They were the ones who'd looked down on Shinzon for being part of a branch family and used him while shutting themselves deep in the mountains. But if it wasn't a Mikado, then who? A gunfight had erupted behind the mansion yesterday. He didn't know who was responsible, but he knew that it had to have been linked to whoever wished to take his life. When Taigi had told him that the assailant could appear at any time, Shinzon shook in fear. That was why he tightened security so much that not even ants could enter, and he shut himself in the mansion. He'd intended to stay put until the problem was solved.
大丈夫。大丈夫だ。今は特別な連中だっている。あいつらがいる限り、相手がどんな化け物だろうと。
Shinzon's teeth clattered like broken castanets, and he didn't even try to stop them. Suddenly the man he used as a secretary rushed inside, his footsteps akin to shrieks. He looked as pale as a dead man, and upon seeing the report the secretary had prepared, Shinzon's face changed to match.
なんだどうしてこうなった
The report told him that his company was on the verge of collapse. Bad news came without end, bringing him closer and closer to insanity. It was a most natural reaction. And with every fax or email he received, the fortune he'd gathered turned to dust.
私の会社どうなってるんだ
Sudden failures in negotiation, inexplicable drops in stock, and funding that stopped as though it had been all been timed. His company collapsed like dominoes, quickly putting him in severe debt. At that rate, his company was done for. He won't be bankrupt. He'd have to fire many of his employees. Moaning as though delirious, he grabbed his head. Couldn't believe this. The whole situation was a nightmare. What was this? Someone set him up? Would have done something so awful. As he got lost in his thoughts, the door to the room was burst open. The one who'd always made his heart stop in his surprise was his shrill-voiced wife, Tama. A vein appeared on her forehead as he clenched his teeth. Did the woman know nothing of his woes?
なんだ俺は忙しいんだ邪魔するなさっさと消えていろ
何が消えているよ破産よ破産もうどうしようもないあんたがあんなどこの馬の骨とも知らない若造を信用したばっかりにこんなことになったのよ
なんだと何の関係がある大体卑屈にあのガキにこびてたのはお前の方だろうが
Letting his rage take over, Shinzon punched his wife's face as hard as he could.
お前は黙ってろ黙ってろ黙ってろ
He got on top of her and punched her over and over. All of them were trash in Shinzon's eyes. Anazono Kurofune, for not giving him his due, and this whore too. However, Shinzon wasn't the only one who was upset. His wife responded by grabbing a decorative porcelain vase on the floor and breaking it over Shinzon's head. His blood-stained wife looked at him with bloodshot eyes and grabbed anything that was close and broke it over Shinzon's head. Shinzon, now covered in blood himself, tried to crawl away. His wife, however, pulled out a katana from the tokonoma and raised it above her head. Snuck out of the academy the same day Sorako discovered my identity and then went straight to my hideout in town. After dedicating a whole day of preparations, I traveled towards Katsuragi Manor. Getting close, I took a route that passed through the forest, and on the way I switched back to the same normal road I'd already used once before. I'd done that out of wariness, since I wanted to avoid anything like the armed maid from the other day. She had inhuman monster strength and technique. I knew they wouldn't surprise me again, but if that truly was one of the maids who called Chagi, then there were two others left. Fighting two of those monsters at once without any preparations was downright suicidal. I chose the normal path to approach the mansion because it was easier to attract attention that way. The maid didn't cooperate with the security guarding the mansion. If they had, our escape route would have been blocked. The maid was the academy's, Kurofune's pawn. Showing off those monstrosities' abilities in front of people would have attracted too much attention. Kurofune had the option of using them for covert operations, but not anything else, as he surely didn't want them to become front-page news. Once Shinzon Katsuragi was down, I had two targets remaining. I'd originally snuck into Tenkoba Noble Academy to search for an opening around my most difficult target, Kurofune Mikado. However, Sorako had discovered Shinri Narita's true identity, and Taigi seemed more or less certain, so I no longer had the option of staying at the academy. What of it, though? I already prepared for Sorako finding out. It's only a matter of time. So I merely had to enact my full revenge within a single night.
7年前のあの夜に帝の者たちと共に死んでいる。ここにあるのはただの亡霊。
Past the trees, I came out on a sloped path. Katsuragi Manor was just on top of this hill. I didn't hide like a rat, instead I walked with full confidence. Beyond the dying silence, I felt hostility as searing as heated iron. You could feel the sense of tension in the air from so far out. According to what Ishii had found, Shinzon had gathered a lot more security personnel overnight, diligent, prepared for this. Like a hedgehog, he'd reinforced his defenses and curled himself up, hoping that it would protect him from my rage.
その程度の城壁で7年の憎悪を阻めるつもりか。生産の時だ。貴様の希望を残らず打ち砕いて作った瓦礫の山を最後には貴様自身の命で飾り立ててやろう。
Ishia's presence would have made this far simpler, but a wound hadn't healed. I knew I faced a challenge, but I had to face it alone. Sensing someone on the hill, I stopped walking. The moon shone brightly behind the person, so I instantly discovered their identity.
Sorako.
That's a gun! Sorako stood in my path, with the rising moon behind her. Her blue eyes contained a firm sense of resolution, and that told me more than any words could. Despite silence, I instantly understood the situation. She had chosen the path she would walk, and this was it. If Sorako had already decided, there was nothing I could say. 7 years ago, our paths had diverged. They would never meet again. Shinri Narita would have his revenge, and Sorako Katsuragi was one of his target's daughter. Our positions had been set in stone a long time ago, and there was no changing it. Sorako pointed the thing in her hand at me. It was a hunting rifle. She ugly supported gun she'd probably never held before with her hands. The distance between us was about 10 meters. With a gun like that, it was as good as point blank. She didn't have the skill to hit me, but it was loaded with anti-deer buckshot. But if it was loaded with anti-deer buckshot, even I would have found it difficult to dodge. But like with professionals, I couldn't predict where the bullets would fly. In a way, she was more of a danger than any other foe I'd faced.
私は行く。
That was all I said, all I had to say. Sorako placed her finger on the trigger. The way she wasn't used to made her shake, but appreciated that she aimed at me with no hesitation. Yes, this was how it had to be. People have the right to protect their happiness, even if it was built upon countless corpses. Facing someone else for that reason was very human, so it made perfect sense to me. Sorako wanted to protect her family, her father, family, or the academy that had become her home. She had no other option. Thus, there was only one thing to do. Shinri Narita would break through all obstacles in his path and enact his revenge. He would kill Shinzon Katsuragi and his other 2 targets over the course of the night.
僕が現れても慌てたりしないんだね。
I gazed right back at her resolute eyes. Then, instead of saying anything, I simply resumed walking. Sorako could tell I was heading towards Katsuragi Manor. The black barrel of a gun was glaring at my heart. It didn't and wouldn't stop. Sorako so much as touched the trigger. I planned to end it all in that very moment.
成田くんがどうしても行くのなら。
Her finger reached for the trigger.
いいよ。
Sorako slowly lowered the hands and gun. The potential power of that gun hadn't stopped me, but the sincerity in her eyes did. Hold on, let me just take 2 screenshots. I forgot to take the screenshots. Is this still on at a distance? No. Come on. I need a distance, more of a shot from a distance. Ah, that was a bit far. Bloody hell. There we go. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's gorgeous.
言っていいよ。何を言ってもあ なたは止まらないって分かってるから。僕ももう止めない。
I hadn't expected that at all. Failed to even understand her words. How could she say that to the man who wished to erase all her
私
happiness?
は君の父親を殺すのだよ。
成田くんは間違ってない。あの人たちも償わないといけないんだ。7年前のことを、今までやってきたことを、何もかも。
自分の発する言葉の意味が分かっているのか。
本当にやりたいことを選べって言ってくれたのは成田くんでしょ。だから僕はここにいるんだ。
Whoops. Now, there were certainly better options for her to take, but Shinri Narita had no right to say that. After all, I was a man who, of all possible paths, picked one of revenge. Closing my eyes, I thought about the things I'd abandoned. Freedom, peace, warmth, that simple life. I could have had any and all of those things if I'd just given up on one. However, I had no regrets. This path was the result I chose myself. No matter how many choices he'd be faced with, Shinri Narita had arrived at this point of his own volition. The girl had chosen something for herself and smiled. Her smile was as pretty as a blooming flower, and as sad as the wind blowing through a wasteland. It was hard of me to move then when she aimed a gun at me.
一緒に行くよ。この深い夜が終わるまで案内するからついてきて。
Soraka turned around and silently followed her. They're gonna arrive and he's just already gonna be dead. Dead to mom. About 2 hours before Shinri and Sorako reunited, Tokino had been trying to contact Sorako all morning. Neither she nor Narita had attended the day's classes. Saku had said that they weren't feeling well and skipped because of it, but Tokino had a bad feeling, so she tried contacting Sorako directly. She hid within her room and used her own device instead of the academy's. She thought by doing so she would avoid getting caught by making the call. After Sorako failed to pick up again, Tokino prepared to depart. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a handgun she had for self-defense, that went to the locker and picked up a rifle-like gun. Both of them were private property that she'd acquired on a whim. She'd ordered the parts separately and put them together herself, and already finished testing them using live bullets. Carrying both weapons, she completed the final checks before placing the handgun in her pocket and the rifle-like gun in a golf bag. Her actions were against regulations, so she couldn't be caught carrying them. Especially not by Kurofune and Mikoto. Okay, now I feel like she's against Mikoto again. I don't know where to place Tokino. I feel like she's kind of siding with Taigi. I feel like Taigi is... Like, we know Taigi is opposed to Kurofune. But he's still helping to a degree, so it feels like he's agreeing what he wants this paradise to persist, but he is very much against the experimentation and lording HMIs over humanity bullshit. Nah, not really. Like, I really don't know where to place Tokino.
Sorako.
Before heading to Katsuragi Manor, Tokino remembered something had opened the drawer on a document-covered research desk. She stared at the thing inside. Suddenly an icon popped up and informing her of a visitor. She thought of pretending to be absent, but changed her mind upon seeing the visitor's ID. Using her fingers, she unlocked the door.
僕です。入りますよ。
Taigen walked inside and saw the disguised golf bag.
行くんですか、時野先生。
どうして空子に教えた？
She looked at him, not as a teacher, but as a male woman. Her glare was so piercing and heavy that it seemed ready to tear his heart out, but it wasn't effective against that particular young man.
何の話ですか？
Taigi shamelessly tilted his head. The motion further enraged and disgusted Tokino.
今夜桂木新山が狙われると空子に教えたのは貴様だ。
She had no proof, but it couldn't have been anyone else. Tokino's ire and will just barely kept her from spitting in that pale snake face. That pale snake's face. That was something that didn't make any sense to her. Tokino understood that Sorako had escaped the academy and reached Shinzon Katsuragi. Despite it all, he was her father, and a girl as kind as Sorako was surely worried about him. However, it didn't explain why Tokino couldn't contact her. If she needed help, she would have surely turned to her. Whatever the case, Taigi had to know why Sorako was acting so strange. Sorako and Taigi were childhood friends. After a certain incident 7 years ago, they'd stopped interacting and continued keeping a distance even after the girl enrolled in the academy. But Tokino knew that it had changed recently, even though she didn't know the reason why. Tokino wanted to tie Taigi up and make him reveal the truth, but she left it for later, for time was short.
僕のことよりも時の先生はどうするんですか？父さんに隠れて葛城のところへ。
当然だ。私は絶対に空子を取り戻さねばならない。
The fact that he'd guessed her entire plan displeased Tokino, but at least she didn't have to worry that he would reveal it to the chairman. Some of Taigi's actions surrounding Shinzon Katsuragi seemed extremely suspicious. Tokino watched him intently to ensure he had more cards to play against him. She had more cards to play against him. If he reported her activities to the chairman, Taigi would go down with her. Taigi obviously knew that, yet he continued to that's farce regardless.
なるほど。絶対ですか。教育者の鏡のような時の先生が、それはまた特別扱いをするものですね。
For no particular reason, Tokino believed that if she didn't go retrieve Sorako, it would be too late.
空子は優れた才能を持っている。知性と意志の強さも併せ持っている。金のことしか見えていない葛城新山、ましてその妻。血のつながりやとっくに死んでいる愛人への嫉妬などという卑俗な感情に動かされる女などには理解できまい。
Instead of nodding and reacting at all, Taigi merely turned over a document on the nearby pile of files. The equations and scribbles there were beyond him. However, he's still casually leafed into some documents before speaking up.
本当に研究者とは思えない情熱ですね、時野先生。まるで空子の両親を憎んでいるみたいですよ。
Tokino once again looked down into the still open drawer. The old framed picture made her squint to hide her nostalgia. But then she still silently shut the drawer.
空子は死んだ姉の娘だ。
先生には確かご姉妹はいなかったはずでは？
腹違いだ。私の母が愛人をしていた男のな。姉。
それは空子を可愛がるわけですね。そんな先生を見れば父はさぞ落胆するでしょうが。
空子は葛城の家に任せておくべきではなかった。過ちは修正する。
She couldn't take anyone with her since it would have attracted Kotofune's attention. However, there was something that she felt she had to do.
帝大義、貴様にも幼馴染を思う心が残っているなら、私が戻るまでおとなしくしているがいい。
She emphasized that he had to keep the secret from the chairman, but he merely shrugged, as disinterested as ever.
貴様の行動について問いただしたいことがある。帰ってきたら、ケリをつけよう。
帰ってきたらですか。それは楽しみですね。お気をつけて、時野先生。
Sorako led me off the road and into the forest. The shallow forest wasn't hard to walk through. Even Sorako managed to handle herself just fine. Didn't even consider the idea that this was a trap. She didn't look back, and weren't the least bit hesitant, showing just how resolute she was. Sorako led me through a path that didn't look planned at all, and she didn't seem the least bit careful. I prepared to run into security a couple times, but strangely enough, we never did. No, this wasn't just strange. It was actually abnormal. Based on my experience, approaching a mansion that was as secure as a spider's web without running into any guards seemed impossible.
こっちへ。
I didn't know what she was basing them on, but she regularly made turns. They seemed pointless, but the results were there, and we eventually arrived at the mansion without running into anyone. Alas, it wasn't perfect.
待て、空子。
As we stepped into the grove surrounding the mansion, I called out to Sorako, making her freeze in place, all confused.
あと一歩でも進めば命を落とす。
My mourning made her gasp. I braced myself, then heard a voice from the darkness.
まさかな。我々の気配に気づいたか。
It I heard a resonant voice that told me nothing about the speaker's age. I heard a resonant voice that told me nothing about the speaker's age coming from the bamboo grove. I heard a voice, but it didn't see the source. The presence was as vague as a mist. It seemed like they were a total of 6, now 8 people. Their presences had been following us ever since we'd entered the bamboo grove. I'd expected them to back away without noticing us, just like the other guards, but these people seemed like more than normal security.
玄馬の一族。そうか。生き延びていたか。
Sharp, shapeless voice shook in perplexion.
我らは知られざる者、姿なき者、闇から闇に消えゆく者。その名を知るとは、貴様。何者か。
私の顔を見忘れたか。
まさか。春水様か。
その声は、改造か。
改造さん
Familiar voice made me feel so nostalgic that I cracked a smile. Sorako, who stood half a step ahead of me, looked into the empty darkness with pained eyes.
お前は他の者とは違って、私や瑠璃と変わりなく、空子の遊び相手も務めてくれたものだったな。
なんだ、春水様に比べれば、空子様は手のかからない良い巫女でした。大義殿と二人して、いたずらばかりされて、よくご当主様に叱られておりましたな。
言ってくれるな。今さら昔の話をされるのは照れくさい。お前がまだ生きながらえていたとは。年の割には達者のようで何よりだ。
春水様こそよもや生きておられたとは。そして戻ってこられたとは。
お前たちがこの場にいるということは、帝なき後、どうやら忠義を失って黒船に仕えたか。
春水様、ご自身がおっしゃった通り、帝家はもうないのです。ならば黒船殿に従うほかどんな道がありましょう。
そうだろうとも。そして私は戻ったぞ。7年前の裏切りにふさわしい報いを与えるために。帝の一族を手にかけた者は残らず殺す。
戻らねば安らぐ道もありましょうに。
獲物に情けをかけるなどらしくもない。この場を見逃されたところで、私が生き延びたことを黒船が知った以上、どこへ逃げる術があるという。
この一件、黒船殿の耳にはまだ入っておりません。
何？
我らは大義殿の命でここまで来たのです。
大義が？
時は移ろいました。所詮我らもあの女狐によって時代に追われるただの異物。己の価値を証明できねば遠からず消え去るのみ。
だから大義の誘いに乗ったと。
是非もなし。
私はこれより桂木新山を殺し、残る2人の仇も討つ。止めたければ来るがいい。海蔵。
空子様を連れてか。春水様、あんな男でも空子様には不君。親殺しの片棒を担がせるおつもりか。
Calm from the darkness did nothing change Sorako's choice. She glared back at the bamboo-piercing
いいん
eyes.
だ。僕が自分で決めたことだから。
ならば。
おう。
The response was curt and cold. I closed my eyes and saw an endless flood of memories, remnants of days long gone. The mountains of my home, the green trees, the dirty smell of grass. The voice from the darkness had played a crucial part in all those gentle memories of mine. Perhaps there was even a time when I'd been closer to him than my own parents. I purposefully banished those memories. The vision of those days were but empty ruins. There was only one thing to do. The weight of the gun in my hand was all that mattered.
大義殿より桂木を守れと命をいただいた。玄馬の名において、たとえ何者であろうとお命頂戴する。
死を仰げ。
Whirling shadows flew towards us from all directions. They were met by gunfire from 2 handguns, 4 shots each, for a total of 8. None missed, piercing their brows. The smaller of the black-clad figures had the face of the old man who'd played with me a lot when I was young. He had no final words. However, as it gazed up the sky's face, a shadow of endless regret and lamentation cast over it.
海蔵、地獄で待て。すぐに残る3人も後を追う。
Shinzon slowly got up. His clothes were messy, his face bloody, but he couldn't even stand properly. His eyes lacked focus. Looking like a doll left in a dump, he backed away. The dry sound that escaped his lips didn't seem like a human voice at all. His staggering legs kicked something. It was his wife, who was what's left of her anyway. A blade's handle peeked out of her stomach. She charged at him with it. He retaliated. Before he knew it, this had happened. Why had it turned out so messy? He had everything he'd ever wanted a mere days ago, but now he was in the darkness, and his wife was crawling around like an insect. His mansion's electric lights had turned off for no apparent reason, and unfortunately he couldn't locate the remote control due to the mess and the struggle. With the moon as the only light in the reception room, he shouted for anyone to come help him. Anyone, you say? Well, you should watch what you wish for. An eerie sense of dread suddenly assailed him, like something he should have been rid of long ago had caught up to him at last. His mind a mess, he decided to throw caution to the wind and run outside. However, someone stood in his way.
誰だとは釣れない話だな。桂木新山。
The light momentarily turned back on, only to vanish once more. The shadow cast on the flooring wriggled. Why was Shinri Narita here? Shinzon looked him in the eyes and saw a light in them that seemed unlike unlike the one he'd seen when the young man had last visited his home.
どこへ行く？逃げ場はないぞ。地の果てへ行こうと犯した罪からは逃れられない。
お前は何を言ってるんだ。どけ、そこをどけ。
察しの悪い男だな。大義から聞いていないのかね。おお、ところで余興は楽しんでもらえたか。お前の資産が相当愉快なことになっていたのだ。
どうして。
フィナーレを彩るちょっとした余興だ。そんな顔してくれると準備に苦労した甲斐がある。桂木新山、どの道お前は終わりだ。
Narito's right. Shinzon had many enemies who'd held numerous grudges, so they wouldn't miss this opportunity. Even if someone avoided bankruptcy, he was a goner. Shinzon would face death due to his past actions. Nothing would be left of him.
安心しろ。そんな幕引きにはさせるものか。お前には私がこの手でふさわしい最後をくれてやる。地獄で花園武士が待っているぞ。
No. No, no, no! The Reaper approached him. Shinzon struggled pathetically as he searched for a way out.
どうして貴 様、俺に何の恨みがあって。
数えきれない憎悪と恨みを買ってきた男の今更が何の恨みがあってとはつくづく滑稽だ。最高級の喜劇だ。まだわからないのか。7年ぶりだ。見分けもつかないか。
7年。
Shinzon looked back into the past. 7 years ago, he took part in a certain conspiracy. He joined hands with Kurofune and purged the Mikados. They, Kurofune, Shinzon, Takeshi, and one other individual slaughtered the obstructive elders in order to gain true freedom. They killed, shot them dead, they killed the women, they laughed as they killed, they tore them apart, they killed them with impunity, they trampled all over them, they crushed them, they burnt them, they killed them with hate, they split their heads open, they killed them with screams, they killed them like insects, they killed the children, they killed them with loathing, they spat on their corpses, they killed them while forgetting them, they killed them, those who ran. The killing was sad, they carved them open, they enjoyed the killing, they killed them all.
そうだ、生きてるはずがない。連中は死んだ、みんな死んだ。ただの一人だって。
Narita approached Shinzon, looking at him with cold, cruel, icy eyes. Shinzon backed away. Fear made him wet himself and leave a trail on the carpet like a slug. The light flickered once more. As it did, the face he briefly saw looked all too familiar.
そんな、まさか、帝小生。嘘だ、お前は死んでるんだ。
No, I was wondering what class he would be at the start of this video if you were to make Narita in D&D. They're straight up an Oath of Vengeance Paladin, so that kind of has to be in there? What were the abilities on that, actually? Hold on. Let me just, Oath of Vengeance. There we go. D&D 5e Wikidot. You get Bane, Hunter's Mark, Hold Person, Misty Step, Haste, Protection from Energy, Banishment, Dimension Door, Hold Monster, and Scrying, additionally for the Oath spells. Channel of Divinity options. Abjure Enemy. As an action, you present your holy symbol and speak a prayer of denunciation using your Channel of Divinity. Choose one creature within 60 feet of you that you can see. That creature must make a Wisdom saving throw unless it is immune to being frightened. Fiends and undeads have disadvantage on this saving throw. On its failed save, the creature is frightened for 1 minute and until it takes any damage. While frightened, the creature's speed is 0 and it can't benefit from any bonus to its speed. On a successful save, the creature's speed is half for 1 minute or until the creature takes any damage. Vow of Enmity. As a bonus action, you can utter a vow of enmity against a creature you can see within 10 feet of you, using your Channel Divinity. You gain advantage on attack rolls against the creature for 1 minute, or until it drops to 0 HP or falls unconscious. Relentless Avenger. At 7th level, your supernatural focus helps you close off a foe's retreat. When you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, you can move up to half your speed immediately after the attack, and as part of the same reaction. This movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. Solar Vengeance. Starting at 15th level, the authority with which you speak your Vow of Enmity gives you greater power over your foe. When a creature under the effect of Vow of Enmity makes an attack, you can use your reaction to make a melee attack against that creature if it is within range. Avenging Angel. At 20th level, you can assume the form of an angelic avenger. Using your action, you undergo a transformation. For an hour, you gain the following benefits. Wings sprout from your back and you grant you a flying speed of 60 feet. You emanate an aura of menace in a 30-foot radius. The first time any enemy creature enters the aura or starts its turn there during a battle, the creature must make a Wisdom saving throw or become frightened of you for 1 minute or until it takes damage. Attack rolls against the frightened creatures have advantage. Once used this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. I guess a few of the first few kind of fit. I guess. Not really the later ones. It just kind of fits for flavor.
そうだ。私は死者だ。ここにいるのは亡霊。貴様を奈落に引きずり落とすために現れた仮初めに過ぎない。
やめて、許してくれ。俺はこの船に奴にそそのかされただけなんだ。あの時だって子供まで殺すことはないって。だが
お前は殺した。何の罪もない帝の人間を一人残らず。私も妹瑠璃も。
He's backed away. Shinzon, the rat, hit something. He screamed and realized that it was his daughter.
ソラコ助けて。こいつが私を殺しに帝出水が。
You know, it's kind of funny because this means that Sorako, while this happened, decided, you know what, gotta sneak behind him and then just stand there and let him run into me for added effect.
どうして二人を殺したの？
His brain failed to process what he just heard. His daughter looked down at him with an emotionless face, like she was attending his funeral.
どうして春水と瑠璃ちゃんを？僕はずっと前から知ってたんだ。お父さんたちがあの日何をしたのかおおよそ分かってた。だって僕には傷が見えるから。お父さんたちの後ろにいつでも二人はいた。血まみれで狂って恨みながら僕は何もしなかった。どうすればいいのかもわからなかった。このままにはしたくない。
He tried to run, only to kick his wife who was still on the floor. She was covered in cold sweat and her unfocused eyes slowly opened. Soraka raised the hunting rifle in her hands. Its barrel was aimed directly at her father. Even as his own daughter prepared to gun him down, Shinzon Katsuragi begged for his life. His pitiful state made him look unworthy of the effort behind this murder. When Shinzon Inarita simply could not accept the idea that the man was still alive, still lived.
やめてくれ、ソラコ。親だぞ。お前の父親なんだぞ。
Soraka placed her finger on the trigger. As she turned to gun down her own father, Sorako's face showed zero hints of strong emotion like hatred or rage.
お父さん、僕は恨んではいませんよ。
She was definitely being honest.
ソラ。
Her words made him feel a sense of relief, but it was soon shattered. An unpleasant feeling permeated the air. Soraka aimed the muzzle of her rifle at her father's heart and placed more strength into her trigger finger.
終わってしまおう、お父さん。もう苦しまなくていい。
There was no festering anger or boiling rage in her. Why then had she decided to cooperate with an avenger? Had she merely picked the man she loved over her father? She didn't hesitate. Like a machine, Soraka slowly pulled the trigger. However, before the hammer pulled back and hit the cartridge, I stopped her hand. Soraka looked at me, a look of shock on her
本
face.
心から望まぬことをする必要はないのだよ。
でも
Soraka had decided to burden herself with sin. She picked up the rifle in order to become a treacherous kinslayer and bear a similar sin to
償
mine.
わせることと命を奪うことは別だ。銃の引き金を引くのなら自分のために引きたまえ。 だからこれは私の役割だ。成田真理はそのために帰ってきたのだから。
成田。
She understood my words and lowered her gun. However, during the moment I lowered my guard to stop Sorako, Shinzon's wife jumped to her feet, driven insane and with a beastly face. She pulled the blade out of her stomach and attacked Sorako with it. She failed to anticipate such an action. Her wound looked extremely grave, so normally a person in her state couldn't even have stood up, let alone move. Her fatal lack of care had me worried under the assumption that she had no way to attack us. Working under the assumption. However, the moment that before I pushed Sorako away, Shinzon Katsuragi jumped to intercept the blow. Sorako gazed at the tip of the blade that completely pierced her father. At least he didn't die a bastard. His last action in life was actually do something right for one fucking once. Upon regaining her senses, Sorako clung to Shinzon as his weakening hands aimlessly clawed at the air. The wound was obviously fatal. I merely stood there and watched as though frozen in place. This was the conclusion to those 7 long years of a constant struggle. A daughter who tried to shoot her father, a mother who tried to pierce the daughter with the very same the father used on her, and a father who entered death's throes because he tried to protect the daughter from the mother. How comical. What a pathetic comedy. Vengeance never came with any sense of accomplishment. I knew full well that selfish anger and hatred led to nothing but tragedy.
Sorako.
Did even Shinzon Katsuragi have fatherly emotions? Could have been warped, but did he love her in his own way? Or was this just a sudden unreasonable act, like an accident? He was the only one with the answer to that question.
成田君。
Sorako looked down as her father experienced his last moments and I made her back away. No matter what Shinzon felt or thought, she knew Narita would fulfill his oath.
幕は私の手で引く。
Sorako seemed to want to say something, but then she shut her mouth and simply listened. Shinzon stared at me with fading eyes.
俺を殺すのか。
裏切り者桂木新山。陰謀に加担した妻タマ。裏切りには報復を。
While lying next to his absent-minded, immobile wife, Shinzon Katsuragi cracked a challenging grin, which became his last. Two 9mm parabellum shots brought this act to an anticlimactic end. Tokino's gonna show up. What the fuck? Like she was prepared to like come in, like shoot shoot the Katsuragis probably, and take Sorako in. Like, what the fuck? You know, why am I doing it like this? I have this here. What the fuck? Also, the tip fell off again when I tried to grab it. It will never stay on. It stayed on. I was not expecting this. Oh well. Second act had concluded at long last. 2 targets remained. Soraka and I loomed over their bodies in silence.
ソラコ、行こう。ここを離れる。
I heard Sorako was just standing there in the move. She probably wanted to watch over her parents, but I didn't want her to linger for too long.
わかった。行くよ。僕は、そう決めたから。成田くんと一緒に行く。
She slowly but confidently stood up, but I quickly closed her mouth with my hand.
静かすぎる。
This mansion was crawling with dozens of security guards. They should have heard shots just now, but the area remained dead silent. Didn't hear any energetic voices, loud footsteps, or guns being readied. In fact, I heard absolutely nothing. But I did smell the scent of blood, and not sweat. Suddenly, Kanto's bullets burst in from the garden. The glass door instantly broke. The furniture turned to splinters, and the torn carpet's pieces rose up to the air. The protector caught Sorako by pulling her to the ground, but no bullets reached the room's center. They weren't trying to kill us. Despite us being in complete darkness, they shot precisely around us in an intimidation tactic.
その場でじっとしていたまえ。
Who was attacking us? Had Confrontation figured out my true identity and sent someone? No, it made no sense. Instead of making use of the surprise fact, they warned us with intimidating shots. That meant that it was someone we could communicate with. But I still didn't know if it was someone worth talking to. The room had been destroyed. Frankly, it looked like the war zone. Despite that, it didn't seem like any security guards were coming. That made sense since they'd already been killed. I was glad Soraka couldn't see in the dark, because lifeless corpses littered the garden. They were little more than Yakuza or gangsters, but they were still armed and had numbers on their side. No normal humans could have dealt with them without making a sound. As I expected, the armed maids walked out of the shadows of the trees, as silent as spiders aiming for their prey. There's a purple one? They didn't look even a little different from the one I killed yesterday. In fact, they were identical down to the last hair. Many skirt-clad maids were armed with Steer AUG military rifles. There were a total of 3 of them. A single one of those inhuman beings was too much for me to handle on my own. So the sight of 3 of them made me want to vomit.
Sorako, 聞こえているのなら返事はしなくていい。その場動くな。すぐに肩をつけてやる。
A person with a familiar voice appeared in the garden. Wearing their usual lab coat was Tokino Yomise in the flesh. She recklessly exposed herself, making her susceptible to sniper fire, which seemed to be a show of her confidence in the maid's abilities. Their defense was truly that perfect. Sorako called after her. Tokino raised her hand, making the maid stop.
そこにいるのか。お前は無事か。桂木新山たちはどうなった。いや、奴らのことなどどちらでも構わないな。
時野さん、どうしてここへ。
ソラコ、無事ならどうして出てこない。近くに誰かいるのか。ここを襲った者がいるはずだが。
その様子だと何も知らずにここへ来たのか。夜店時の女子。それはまた極めつけの喜劇だ。
Upon hearing and recognizing my voice, Tokino lost her composure and squinted her eyes in rage.
その声は成田真理。なぜここに。いや、桂木新山の命を狙っていたのは貴様だったのか。
察しがいいと言ってやりたいが、ここに至っては今更すぎる。スクールでのデスクワークが長すぎて緊張感を失ってしまったのかね。
私の本職は医学者だよ。貴様のようなけだものじみた輩と違ってな。今夜は特別だ。さて、担当講師として貴様の無断外出を咎める前に答えてもらおう。成田真理、どうして貴様が新山を狙う。ね
え、時野さんも知ってたの。7年前帝の家で何があったのか。
帝の家だと。
Soroka's question had a silent yet inescapable power behind it. No one could hide anything from her halo.
どうして今になってそれを。
亡霊が戻ってきたからだよ。夜店時7年前の生産を果たすために死の底から舞い上げた。それとも古い話は何もかも忘れてしまった。
そんな、まさかあの時生き残ったものなど。
そうだ、いるはずがない。だから言ったろ、亡霊だ。
そうか、帝春水。よくも無様に生きながらえたものだな。
So she was one of the people behind it. She probably didn't see it from there, but I replied with a gruesome grin. There was no fear in my expression. In fact, it shook with excitement and joy after all. The start of the third act had arrived all on its own, sparing me the trouble.
時野さん、ごめんなさい。僕は彼と一緒に行きます。
何をバカなことを。その男はもうお前の幼馴染ではない。復讐などという干渉でお前の父親を殺した怪物だ。
いいんだ、全部わかってる。でも僕はもう帰らないって決めたんだ。
そんなことは許さん。お前は私と一緒にスクールに戻るんだ。
ごめんなさい、こんな身勝手をして。時野さんがたくさんのものをくれたのに全部を裏切って。僕は行きます。だから時野さん、僕を憎んでください。
何をバカなことを言っている。そんな男と一緒に行ってどうする。復讐に狂った男に行き場などない。不幸になるだけだぞ。スクールに帰ればお前は全てを手に入れられる。その資格がある。これまでの不幸も何もかも残らず取り返せる。
ダメだよ時野さん。世界全部が手に入ってもそこに僕の欲しいものはないから。僕の幸せはここにあるんだ。
ダメだ。お前は私と帰るんだ。お前は誰よりも幸せにならなければいけないんだ。
She almost seems panicky. Like she feels so bad about what happened to her that she wants like everything for her, even if she doesn't want it.
死んだ姉さんの分まで。
ありがとう時野さん。ずっと僕を思ってくれていて、それだけで僕は十分だよ。
A long shredding scream. Sorako's response left no room for persuasion, so Tokino was rendered speechless. However, the scientist standing in the silent natural garden soon found somewhere to direct her rage.
貴様がソラコを惑わせたのか。帝。いや、成田真理。やはり貴様をスクールに招くべきではなかった。
The anger she directed at me was akin to the winds raging in hell. They seemed to burn my skin. Oh, finally. For 7 long years, she finally accepted me as an enemy.
貴様が何者だろうと興味はない。お前はただの毒虫。人類とソラコの輝ける未来を蝕む名もなき悪役だ。
その憎悪と怒りに感謝しよう。それでこそ7年をかけたこの舞台の甲斐もある。そして別れを世見せ時の罪は罰をふさわしき鉄槌を。
Both of us were monsters, facing each other down in order to get revenge for stealing what we cherished most. That made it all the more worth it. And to simply trample over her raging curses and throw them onto the pyre honoring those who died on that night 7 years ago. There was no need for words. Facing the darkness, we glared at each other with fiery intensity, knowing full well we couldn't allow the other to exist. The sky was decorated by a large moon and clouds passed by. Shadows grew, sandy grew, veil of night remained thick. The wind rustled the trees. We ignored the 5 of us. The mansion was drowned in silence, as if lamenting yet another tragic play wrought by the hands of foolish humans. The moon hid behind the clouds.
1号、3号、4号。私とソラコ以外の動くものは全て処理しろ。この屋敷ごと消せ。
Following that order, the maid silently spread out with almost surgical precision. No normal human could have followed their movements. They were as fast as leopards and strong as grizzly bears. The maids were akin to shadows cutting through the night with its darkness. First shots were no doubt warnings. It was clear that they intended to keep me in place, but with such a gap in firepower, I had no means to break through, even if I wanted to. Merely had my trusty Luger, 2 Glocks 70s, and a P90 PDW. With was overwhelmed by the fact that they had me outmatched threefold. Almost just by firepower. Soraka threw a worried glance at me, touched her cheek and grinned to calm her down.
何？私はこれでも追い詰められるほどやる気になるたちなのでね。だがソラコ、君は一人で先に逃げたまえ。連中は君には手を出さないだろう。
僕は成田君と一緒に行く。
Swift response seemed resolute. Didn't plan on changing her mind no matter what I did. My rational science seemed that a belief that running out with her would merely slow me down. What nonsense! To come all this way, fully prepared for everything.
ついてこい。
はい。
Gunfire from 3 different directions poked holes in the garden stones and scattered sparks all over. Holding the P90 in my right hand, I pulled Soraka with my left before dashing into the storm like a loose arrow. The gunfire flashed through the darkness instantly. Flashing through the darkness instantly stopped. They didn't want to hit Soraka.
右へ。
Soraka pointed into the darkness and I placed my trust in her. Instead of waiting to analyze the enemy's actions, I dashed in the direction she pointed out. The space I had just inhabited was cut by blades akin to a raptor's claws. There were 2 African throwing knives. Could have dodged them if I'd gone straight. Sprinting like a puma from a savannah, one maid caught up to me at insane speeds and flanked my left. There was another one at my right, too. I was sandwiched. Even if I ignored the fact that I had Soraka with me, the maids exceeded the human limits by far. Running was not an option. I was gonna would have been fucking funny if like he was carrying her like princess style. He just fucking pulls out a shotgun. I got him! One on the left aimed 2 handguns directly at me, while the one on the right had her hands behind me, clearly preparing some sort of weapon.
そのまままっすぐ。
I did as told and ran without a doubt in my mind. A moment later, I had 2 USPs fire .45 ACP bullets. Suddenly a garden stone appeared between me and the maze. It had arrived with such immaculate timing that the word accident didn't seem to fit and blocked the 2 .45s. Despite all that, I didn't slow down at all. I used the split second the shield was between us to think before letting go of Soraka's hand and running up the garden stones. After I jumped and my vision expanded, I saw one of the maids rising up from the opposite side like my reflection was while aiming her handguns at me. I'd anticipated that. She was close enough for me to reach. Before she managed to fire, I chopped her wrists to throw the guns out of her hands. Then I fired the P90 in my right hand. She spun in the air and avoided the 90 bullets per minute gun. A second later, she completed a somersault and launched a kick. As I lay draw an arc towards my jaw, I saw a metal blade at the tip. She had a boot knife. They were more of an assassination tool, so they weren't all that useful in standard battles, but on the legs of those maids, they could easily lop off a man's head. The maid on the right approached me from behind, spinning the things she pulled out of her skirt. Bolas. They were hunting weapons that were basically weights linked by a string. This one had a total of 4 metal balls. Though they weren't lethal, they could wrap around limbs and bite their target, making them difficult to handle by hand and a troublesome item in general. After calculating my trajectory, the maid launched the bolas, making sure to add the speed of the spin to the throw. The maid's emotionless face, which seemed to be that of a killing machine, then warped in surprise. Fuck! Friendly fire! The bola sailed straight towards the upside-down maid's back. Friendly fire was something no one would have expected from those monstrous maids. The incomprehensible event made even the maid stop midair. I used the opportunity to shoot her with the full auto mode of my P90. Did Sorako's Halo evolve a plot convenience function? Or something?
Shut up!
No matter how monstrous they were, as long as they were living beings, they stood no chance of surviving that firepower. Or at least she was armed badly enough to be rendered immobile when she fell to the ground.
一旦この屋敷を出る。
左へ。
Taking Sorako by the hand, I followed her instructions to the letter. Like when she'd led me to the mansion, and the path she took us on was unbelievably precise. We rushed past all the openings left by the maids and broke through the encirclement without issue. Wonder what to make of that strange phenomenon, but I decided to investigate after we survived. We soon saw a white plaster wall. Calculated it would have taken me 3 seconds to reach it. One more to get over it, and one more to drag Sorako up.
ソラコ、登れるか。
はい、すぐに。
Stared straight at the 3 maids that got up on the wall. Then I gave Sorako my hand and pulled her up. As I predicted, it only took 5 seconds.
もう少し走る。いけるな。
はい、成田君の邪魔にはならないから。
Suddenly a sharp wave of bloodlust crashed into me. Tokino Yomise, who hadn't moved from position at first, suddenly aimed her gun that was 3 times the size of an over one of me. It was a grenade launcher. The most fitting weapon for Miss Tokino, who was truly relentless. She traveled to the mansion with the intent to wage war. Something drew a parabola in the sky. Grenade? No, that would have killed Sorako. It had to be a flashbang. Were grenades that released explosions of intense sound and light, materially destroying the target's vision and hearing.
Sora!
Didn't warn her in time. The flashbang above us exploded, drowning us in light. The sound so great I couldn't hear myself. Sometimes the light and the sound of light not only stole the senses, but also affected the target's mental orientation. The white light in my retinas blinded me. The sound reminiscent of reverberating metal echoed through my ears. However, I knew we couldn't stop. Standing on the wall made us an easy target for the maids. I attempted to ignore the issue with my eyes and ears and jumped down the wall based on intuition. A mental image of the scene prior to the flashbang. However, Sorako remained completely incapacitated. Couldn't hear each other. Suddenly someone pulled our hands with great force. It wasn't Sorako's hand, but who else could it have been in that situation? Focused on feeling and the fingers and quickly realized they were unexpectedly slender. Was this a woman's hand? Based on the rhythm of her steps, I could tell the flashbang hadn't affected her. Considering that it was a trap meant to capture us, I considered that it was a trap meant to capture us, but I quickly discarded the idea since it would have been too roundabout. Is it Hishia? The hand led us into the... Nah, I said he didn't know. Hand led us into the forest near the mansion. Even though I couldn't see, I managed to walk around just fine based on my memories. I was once chased into an ancient underground Roman labyrinth where I lost my flashlight, but still managed to outwit my pursuers and escape to total darkness by relying on memory alone. Soon enough, my vision cleared.
危なかったな、成田、空子。
Tamo, what the fuck? Tamo of all people had saved us from certain doom.
玉緒ちゃん、どうしてこんなところに？
まさか玉緒に助けられるとはね。礼を言おう。
別にいらねえよ。俺はここで別れるし。まだあいつらに面が割れるのは都合悪いんでな。
うん。
I'd already predicted that she wasn't a mere HMI. Tamo Akihito had enrolled to accomplish a goal, much like Shinri Narita. That hour, she would have been in her room at the dorm, but I assumed she wasn't because of the aforementioned goal. Tamo must have noticed Tokino acting strange and chased her upon realizing that it might have helped her complete her job.
やはり礼は言っておくとするよ。明石と玉緒。君は自分の都合を曲げて私と空子を救ってくれた。君の友情に感謝する。
僕もありがとう、玉緒ちゃん。
She'd risked everything to save us. That meant, if only for a moment, she'd prioritized us over her personal goals.
ほんと大げさだな、お前ら。それよか、あいつらしつこそうだし、せいぜいうまく逃げろよ。
我々が何をしているのか聞かなくていいのかね。
With a vigorous Tamo looked away and began walking.
いらねえよ。お前らも俺が何してるのか聞かないだろ。
Tamo rejected any further intimacy. Silence said it all, so Sorako nodded in response.
戻ったら サクとエルちゃんに僕からお元気でってそう伝えておいて。
わかった。任せとけ。成田は何か伝えるようなことはあるか？
Tamo accepted Sorako's emotional farewell with a casual glance, then turned to face me. That moment I realized we would most likely never meet again.
不要だよ。
The academy was just a brief stop for me, even if it provided me warmth that I thought I lost. I merely had to say goodbye to that short dream-like phase of my life. Certainly had words of gratitude, perhaps even some parting regrets, but Shinji and Narita had no right to speak them. Once I eliminated the remaining 2 targets, the academy would never be the same again. It very well could collapse as a result of my actions. Yet I still planned to pull the trigger. Shinji and Narita planned to destroy the home of the Crowns, as well as all the other HMIs. Oh no, Shinji and Narita planned to destroy the home of the Crowns, as well as all the other HMIs cherished. That was why I never revealed my true thoughts to Tamao. Farewell and thank you for the beautiful illusion.
2人で駆け落ちしたとでも言っといてやるよ。
Tamao left behind one fine parting joke before she ran off into the forest. She mixed into the darkness like a nocturnal beast and vanished without a trace.
さよなら、玉緒ちゃん。
Sorako's prayer like goodbye melted into the night wind and disappeared. The ephemeral illusion had come to an end. It was time for Shinri Narita to descend upon a world of intense carnage, settle the score with Tokino Yomise once and for all. Like a skilled hunter, Tokino held her breath as she and 2 SSDs, the armed maids, chased after Narita and Sorako, who escaped into the forest. Tokino didn't plan to let them get away. Narita may have been able to escape on his own, but Sorako was with him, and she wasn't used to perilous mountain paths. He couldn't have gotten far either. However, that was as much of an advantage as it was a disadvantage. She had to retrieve Sorako without harming her, meaning that they had to refrain from using weapons where possible.
あの時確実に処理しておけばよかった。
As she rushed through the old growth, she had a bitter expression while looking back at her failure of 7 years ago. Shinri Narita was a man who should have already died on 2 occasions. Once during the night 7 years ago, and once later in his life. His luck seemed to make him unkillable. Perhaps it was a curse that kept him alive. Whatever the case, she never could have predicted that someone should have been dead and buried had survived, returned to Japan and plotted revenge. The most irritating aspect in her mind was the fact that she and Kurofune had invited him to the academy. She had to correct her mistake. He had to die once and for all.
さあ、出てこい成田真理。
She didn't care if he was hiding like a rat. The SSDs were far beyond humans. I almost dropped this. They would quickly hunt him down and kill him. Suddenly an unreasonably unidentified feeling ran down her back. When she was a little girl, her hobbyist grandfather had taken her hunting a few times, and when she'd been approached by a giant bear with a taste for human flesh, the sensation she just felt seemed similar to her reaction back then. It almost felt like she was the hunted. She looked at the SSDs, but neither number 1 nor 2 had noticed anything. Number 4 was left behind due to grievous wounds, but 2 should have been more than enough for a standard human, even if he was a powerful HMI. SSDs matched entire special operations squads all by themselves, and Tokino Yomise was to call them the ultimate offensive and defensive force on the planet. Tokino remained certain that it was only a matter of time until they caught Narita, but then something under her foot made a sound. Boop. Giant explosion trampled all over the silence of the dark forest. Shockwave from the 20-odd landmine chain explosion reached us without any trouble. Standing on a slanted hill, I looked down at where Tokino stood, watching as the vibrations subsided.
戦争をするつもりだったのなら 相手にも同じ覚悟があると思っておくべきだよ。
I'd learned a lesson during my last battle with one of those maids, so I prepared some surprises in the forest at a time. I set up a field of remote-controlled anti-personnel mines in C4. I planned to use it against the armed maids in case they appeared. Ishia wasn't with me, so making it inconspicuous was a severe challenge. But in the end, I was simply glad that it had proven useful. Tokino truly was a scientist at heart. No supreme offense or unbreakable defense existed in this world. The armed maids were only the strongest when they acted as assassins, bodyguards, or insurgents. Bringing them to a true war made them significantly less effective. The anti-personnel claymore released about 700 ball bearings each. With over 20 of those were there, even those maids couldn't escape.
では、この舞台の幕を引くとしよう。
The two armed maids had both expired, but unfortunately for me, Tokino Yomise yet lived. Sorako-Route was down on her. Sorako had chosen to see this through to the end. That way she would properly bear the weight of her decision.
Tokino-san.
Sorako looked at the woman who cherished her with a hint of sorrow and resignation in her eyes. She clearly knew what was about to happen.
幕引きだ。夜見せ時の。
I aimed the too familiar Luger, my oath-sworn arm at her. Honestly, it seemed strange that she still breathed. Probably couldn't even see anymore, which meant she didn't even know that Soraka was watching.
成田真理は復讐者だ。正義も未来も夢もない。私はただ復讐という己のエゴでお前たちを殺すのだ。
Sorako.
With a hoarse voice, she rang out the name of the girl she cherished while weakly reaching towards empty space. Or it felt like she was reaching for someone other than Sorako. Her hand seemed rather helpless and feminine as they moved about. Her hands wandered aimlessly, extending towards the moon. In her final moments, her mouth moved in a futile attempt to speak a certain name. Another act ended.
帝、黒船。あとは貴様だけだ。
One remained. Once Kurofune Mikado was dealt with, this revenge tragedy would truly come to an end. Those days of hatred and bloodshed would cease to exist, and so too would Shinri Narita. The curtain would fall once and for all on his painfully long play. The painful silence of the forest almost made me lose consciousness. After the tense battle, I was left with a growing sense of fatigue. The exhaustion made my vision blurry. It had to be because I'd gone through so many battles in so little time. Thank my stars that I wasn't badly injured.
わーひと、いとねん。たらた。
Took a deep breath and stabilized my mind and heart. My limbs were as heavy as stones. The only thing propping them up as I walked was my deep-seated hate for the final target. Kurofune would soon learn of Tokino Yomisa's death. With the armed maids devastated, he didn't have much left to protect him. The best possible time to strike was that night. Couldn't waste the opportunity.
これからどうするの？
このまま奥島へ戻って、その足でスクールへ取って返して。
そう。
すまないが空子、もうしばらく歩くことになりそうだ。車までた。
Suddenly from beyond the hands I extended towards Sorako. I heard the familiar sound of a gun cocking. Honestly, I wanted to save her, even if it meant betraying everything else. Sorako walked a step behind Narita. She was only looking at his back, but she knew he was exhausted. Yet she forced herself not to act considerate. Sorako, who didn't know the intensity, severity, and anger of hatred, it was hard to even imagine what drove him. Even her halo didn't help her understand it. However, witnessing the death of her father, stepmother, and Tokino, she caught a few glimpses of the intense, harsh life Narita had led. Gazing at his back made Soraka think he was like a firework. Shinri, Narita had embraced the life of obsession, one which was destined to be both powerful and brief. She felt that perhaps that was what she'd found most attractive about him, for it was something out of her grasp.
このまま行かせてもいいのか？成田は黒船理事長を殺しに行くんだろ？
Hibiki talked to her as he'd always done. When had Sorako first established contact with her other self? How long had they actually been together? She didn't know, but Sorako did know that when she'd isolated herself and started running away, they spent time encouraging and talking to each other. Hibiki was the closest person to Sorako in the world, perhaps even including Narita. Ichiji was probably soon out in the actual game.
今夜の終わりまで一緒に行くって。
Her father died, her mother passed, and so did Tokino. And all those happened in part due to Sorako's own choice. It was obvious what would come next. During the explosion incident, she wished to survive because she wanted things to change. In her mind, things couldn't have continued as they were. That included herself, of course. She'd known that the chairman, her parents, and Tokino all played a part in the tragedy that happened 7 years ago, yet she'd done nothing. For a moment, she remembered the childhood friend with a similar wound to Narita's. Did Taigi know his father was responsible? Sorako's halo couldn't read minds, but she knew that Taigi still suffered, much like Narita. Taigi's wound wasn't quite like the same searing, all-consuming void in his heart like Narita's, but felt just as deep and profound. His wound was full of festering wounds. Everyone had suffered some. Due to that knowledge, Sorako lacked the ability to feel anger. Even now, she didn't feel a desire to get revenge when she looked at Narita. Instead, Sorako simply wanted to end the cycle of hatred. Simply wanted to close all the wounds that had opened 7 years ago. Indeed, she wanted to grant him true peace. What of her, though? Narita had already given her one answer. She would make the curtain fall over this cycle of hate once and for all. That was indeed a perfectly viable solution. As someone who knew everything and yet did nothing, Sorako figured she had to see this through to the bitter end. She would just do that so long as she reached the end of this night. She would do just that, I mean.
そこまででいいんだ。それ以上、彼の重荷にはなれない。空子は、奴の重荷なのか？僕が一緒にいたら、成田くんは、忘れられないでしょ。
Couldn't forget the days he'd lost, the pain he'd experienced, the fact that he'd killed Sorako's parents.
何もかも終わった後も、きっと、成田くんは自分を責め続けてしまう。僕を不幸にしたかもしれないって。
Now it wouldn't be a fitting end. Shinri Narita had lost more than enough. His sister, family, sister, past, life, and even his name had been taken from him. That was why Sorako thought of disappearing. The mere thought that it would make him cry made her chest hurt. However, sadness didn't last forever. People moved forward when given enough time. So he would eventually forget Sorako, put his quest for vengeance behind him, and finally start a new life. There was no place for her there. She too was his past after all. She was but a reminder of a cursed bloody memory. Sorako remained selfish until the very end. She betrayed her own family and had since prepared to abandon the man who loved her. She realized what a selfish woman she was, or Sorako Katsuragi would still do what she had to do. What she had to. It was also the fact that walking any further was hard. She'd killed many people. Even if she hadn't pulled the trigger, she'd agreed to it. So the blood was definitely on her hands. She didn't regret it, but it was a sin nonetheless. Parents had atoned. It was only right for her to do the same.
響ちゃんはどうしたい？
She asked the same question Hibiki had refused to answer at the academy.
僕は今夜の終わりまで行ったらそれでもういいんだ。
It was enough for Sorako. She experienced a lot of pain, but her wish had come true. The wish for Shunsui and Rui to return had come true. She had abandoned that childish wish once she realized it couldn't be granted. But in the end, at least half of it had been. So she no longer had any regrets. So she thought. Unfortunately, there was still something coiling around her heart. She thought about it, then stopped and shut it away.
体は響ちゃんが使えばいいよ。
Hibiki's response, however, shocked Sorako to her core. Fuck no.
私はスクールを守らなくちゃいけない。
Sorako had expected a scolding, but Hibiki didn't talk about her choice at all. Said she wished to protect Tenkawa Noble
どう
Academy.
いうこと？あいつは成田はスクールに戻る。そして黒船理事長を殺す。私は理事長のことなんて信用してない。ろくでもない男に違いないだろう。でもスクールを動かせるのはあの男だけだ。黒船がいなくなれば全てが台無しになってしまう。成田が言った通りだよ。本当にやりたいことをやれと。今もあいつの声が聞こえてる。
If there is anger in your heart, do not hesitate. Sorako could hear the voice as well. It resounded within her like an echo. The words were meaningless to Sorako. She could bring herself to hate or get mad at anyone until the very end.
成田くんは間違っていないよ。
Shinri surely had the right to enact revenge.
それは成田の理由だ。私の理由じゃない。私は思ってたよりもあの場所が好きらしい。だからこれが成田の教えてくれた私の響の戦う理由だよ。響ちゃんはみんなを守りたいんだね。それが一つだけの望みなんだ。たとえあいつの邪魔をすることになっても。それなら今しかないか。
The dispute had to be settled there. If he returned to Okushima, he would head straight for Kurofune.
僕は成田くんを自由にしたいんだ。じゃあちょうどいいな。ちょうどいい。
She felt happy that he valued her, sad that she couldn't accompany him, and hurt by the fact that he treasured her. But still, she would do it, even if it meant harming the most important thing in her life. She would do what she had to do. She would free him from his change and allow him to gaze up the sky from their past once more. It was time to raise the curtains on Sorako-Katsuragi's stage.
こういうのも妥協っていうのかな。誰かの幸せは誰かの不幸せでないと贖えない。でもそれだと二人で一緒に幸せにはなれない。僕たちは初めから二人だから、二人で探すためにはどちらでもない道を探さないといけない。そういう時は少しだけ諦めればいいんだ。諦めきれないものを諦めて少しだけ得をして、少しずつ損をする方法を考える。そういう妥協で人類はたくさんのことを成し遂げてきたんだって以前時野さんが言ってたんだ。今の私たちみたいにか。だから
After trailing off during their final sentence, Sorako Katsuragi picked up the gun. She then caught her breath and raised the object in her hand.
空子。
成田くん、僕は今夜の最後まで一緒に行くつもりだった。
The muzzle before my eyes was so dark that it resembled a portal to hell. The situation confused me for a moment, but then I understood. After all, it was a manifestation of an emotion I knew all too well. Revenge.
そうか。だがなぜ今だ。その理由を聞かせてはもらえないか。
If she'd waited at least until Shinri Naita fought Kurofune, even if I survived, would have been completely drained and as vulnerable as a baby. With short hair danced in the wind. Still aiming her gun at me, she flashed me a sad smile.
僕は家族を時野さんを裏切ってしまった。僕は成田くんへの愛情を優先した。きっとこれが僕が一番欲しいものだと信じて。
Soraka stopped there and then shook her head before squinting and continuing.
後悔はしてない。でもね、思い違いもしてた。一番欲しいものを手に入れても、2番目、3番目に欲しいものが必要じゃなくなるわけじゃないんだね。
Of course. However, generally when a person sought two things at once, they ended up with neither. Most people understood that, yet they still found it hard to avoid that pitfall. I myself was no exception. I tried to enact my revenge while getting close to Sorako. She'd pursed her lips and furrowed her brow, but her eyes were moist. It was caused by an emotion that was rather hard to understand. Mix of anger, sadness, and love.
成田くん、愛してる。でも、あなたは憎むべき仇でもある。父さんと母さん、それに時野さん、みんな罪深い人たちだった。何も知らない帝の人たちを殺した。あなたや瑠璃ちゃんを殺した。あなたは正しい。何も間違ってない。復讐する正当な理由も権利もある。僕がその結果を悲しく思っているだけ。僕はただ僕の理由でこうして銃を構えてるんだ。そして私にも理由がある。
Soraka's expression shifted to indicate that her other self, Hibiki, had taken charge.
お前を行かせたらスクールが終わってしまう。
私が黒船を殺せばということか。
成田も分かってるんだろ。スクールを運営できるのは帝黒船だけだ。あの男がどれだけ卑劣で罪深くても奴を必要としている人間がいる。
君もなのだね。
She hadn't said much, but I knew what she meant. The normal, peaceful, relaxing days at the academy were hanging by a thread. To Hibiki, who'd spent most of her time in solitude with Sorako, those days were more precious than anything else.
成田、私に名前をくれてありがとう。
Stern personality showed me a warmer expression for once. She looked a lot like Sorako because she didn't have her glasses on, but everything about her still felt fresh and different.
お前は二人でこそ得られる幸があるかもしれないとか言ってたけど、どうやら無理みたいだな。まあ仕方ない。世の中なんてそんなものだよ。ずっと腐りきった果実みたいな場所だって思ってた。どこもかしこも不臭ばかりの真っ暗なところだと。でもまあ地獄にだって光は差す。ほんの一瞬でも星みたいに小さくても輝くものがある。それが分かったから。
君の別れはまるで詩のようだ。よく分かった。話してくれてありがとう、ソラコ、響。
僕の方こそ聞いてくれてありがとう。
Sorako shot me one last smile before readjusting the gun in her hand. In order to dash forward, I lowered myself to about half my height and gathered strength in my lower body. It was something Soraka wanted, so there was nothing more for me to say. There was only one path she and Narita would walk on. Just as it happened, after it was all over, I would have gladly handed my life over to Sorako. But I still had an oath to fulfill, as well as a burning lust for revenge in my heart, so I had to claim victory. Feelings mixing and churning within Sorako sometimes showed on her face. This was something she had to do, just as Shinri Narita had fulfilled his oath. Despite being an avenger, I'd fallen in love with her and dragged her into this hell. So Shinri Narita was the one responsible for Sorako holding that gun. That's the way I was the one who had to end it. Time ground to a halt. Before she pulled the trigger, I ran. Heavy sound of gunfire reached my ears. I side-eyed the buckshot as it scattered the bark of a nearby tree. It vanished into the dark, dense forest. After dodging the first shot, Narita darted into the forest. Sorako only had one shot left. If she missed that one, she had no hope of winning.
やっぱりすごいね、成田君。まともにやると勝ち目どころか勝負にもならないぞ。それは困るな。
No matter which of them survived, either Soraka's or Hibiki's wish would come true. However, if Narita had decided to show pity and merely tie her up, all her actions would have been in vain. She was but a foolish woman who had betrayed him, abandoned their love, and tried to avenge her parents. That was how he saw her. He would never forget her. Sorako had to become a lowly traitor not worth remembering. She was fine with being a foolish woman who aimed her gun at those who loved her. However, as she was now, there was nothing she could do to fulfill her or Hibiki's wish.
二人ならできるかもしれないね。いいんだな。本当に。やろう。さっきお父さんたちのところでしたみたいに。
Oh, I think I just figured it out. Is it a case of, due to the multiple personality things, she actually does have her own halo? Soraka took a deep breath.
If good
No.
ロミオ&ジュリエット3な。
I dodged Sorako's shot and hid within the forest. Teaming with Soraka wasn't exactly difficult. If I'd rushed forward instead of back, it would have been over already. Unfortunately, I'd hesitated. The fact that I still wavered after coming so far was laughable. I already killed a number of people, so I had no room for regrets. I killed my targets, as well as those who sided with them. Some were even familiar faces I'd once loved. Two of them were Sorako's parents. Couldn't step off the path I'd chosen at that point, even if I was dealing with Sorako. Suddenly a chill ran down my spine. My battle-hound instinct screamed at me, warning that I was in mortal danger. An inexplicable sense of dread forced my hand. I started following Sorako's presence, trying to find the best spot to finish the battle. No intention of letting this drag on. I planned to finish it in a flash. Even if this place ended up being my grave, I would end this before I died. I knew the taste of revenge better than anyone. It left you parched, with no help of ever escaping the cycle of violence. The cold, lucid moonlight seemed to lord over the land. The grey surface, void of warmth and life, represented the edge of this contradictory world of man. Would we end? Someday reach it? If so, would it bring us peace? No one knew the answer to that, nor could they. In order to shake off my remaining hesitation, I chose to end it with my Luger, my oath-sworn arm. Soraka and Hibiki would never defeat Shinri Narita, even if they were completely justified in their actions, because in the end, none of that truly mattered. There's only one harsh truth. In this world, prayers and desires were all transient. Life always stood on the boundary between a finger and a trigger. That was precisely what it meant to be alive. Each step we took further blackened us in sin. So life was a pilgrimage while we walked through a wasteland until the weight became too much to bear. I feel like it was supposed to be become instead of because. In order to live, you had to trample over others' lives. Well, Soraka and I merely chose a path that accepted that simple truth and pushed it further. That was why I threw aside my hesitation and bet everything on that single moment. I jumped out, raised my oath-sworn arm, and aimed it at Sorako's brow. But she wasn't there. That begged the question, where had she gone? Finding that utterly absurd occurrence, I honed my senses to an inhuman degree in order to search for my enemy. Sorako stood behind me. She actually had actually failed to sense her presence. Sorako already aimed her gun at me, so my life would end before I even turned back to face her. In those final moments I realized that was a result of Sorako Katsuragi's power. Tokino Yomise had been alright all along. Sorako Katsuragi's power was the ability of a rightful king. It was something that transformed her into a supreme monarch. Just like when she led me to Katsuragi Manor, Sorako saw the path to descend. Wounds that she'd seen on other people were actually the points on them that were closest to their ends. There were but one facet of her true ability. Sorako was only human, so her brain was simply more compatible with others of her kind. However, now that it had expanded and grown, Sorako's power allowed her to perceive paths to the ends of not just humans, but other living creatures, objects, and events. Oh, so the wounds aren't like straight up wounds, they are points in time where the person could have died or something like that. Is that it? Sorako Katsuragi led everything to a peaceful conclusion. When she'd led us to the end at Katsuragi Manor, bodyguards failed to even notice our presence. Then she'd let Tokino to her end. She'd actually made the armed maids harm each other. She simply followed the leads, the paths she perceived. The world bowed before her. Everything unwittingly matched to their ends. The characters in the story Soraka was weaving. The world was rife with suffering. Suffering was merely change. Comfort was a momentary thing. Change would eventually wash it all away. However, if change were suffering, then stagnation was paradise. Thus, Sorako's halo led things to the point of perfect stagnation. The paradise of death. Sorako pulled the trigger. A mere moment remained between my life and death. The body continued to move, refusing to let it end there. Maddened Avengers who'd lost the mask of reason were driven by the painfully human fuel known as hatred. All would vanish from my consciousness. Both the mornings of searing rage as well as the nights of sadly crying tears of grief would disappear in but a moment. In that split second, the hammer fell in slow motion. As the hammer fell in slow motion, I took aim. The first time Sorako had tried it, she was scared. She subconsciously understood that her power led things to their ends. The world was a place of near constant change. Even stars and time perished if change ceased. Soraka was terrified of the power inside her, for it was so peaceful that she couldn't bear to even look at it. It was a contradictory power that brought things to their ends in order to grant them true peace. Now, since to live was to suffer, this was the only true answer. Soraka was afraid of the fact that she desired something like that. She had no reason to live, but she didn't want to die either. She merely wanted to see them again after all. It was her sole desire. To deny one's halo was to deny oneself. That's precisely what she did. She resisted her own deepest desires. She fought against her true nature, desperately hoping that neither her nor anyone would be dragged to their end. If she had been alone, she would have broken during the struggle. But one day she'd heard a voice.
聞こえているか?
A question without a clear source.
私は空子の欠けた怒りから別れたのかもしれないね。ずっと背負わせてたのかな。私は私で楽しかったよ。僕も。
Resisting and praying until the end, to pulled the trigger. Not in order to end something, but in hopes that it would be the beginning of something new. The sky above was dominated by a blue moon. As it shined down on her, she pled. She pled for him to forget about it. The sound of 2 gunshots resounded through the vast forest. It was the sound of sadness. He hit first, I feel. Soft clouds covered parts of the sky, briefly blocking the powerful early summer sun as a cool breeze whipped by. It felt like spring had returned. Sakoneru looked up at the sky. Sorako and Narita had returned. The two of them had vanished without saying a thing.
自分、大丈夫だと思います。片方ならともかく、二人一緒に消えたということは 案外、空子がボテバラかもしれません。リア充め、せいぜい人口増加に貢献しろ。
そうかもしれないわね。
Saku casually but sadly looked up at the flowing clouds.
またいなくなって。
Eru said nothing, for she knew that Saku had always been bothered by Mitri's disappearance. They were soon joined by Tamo, though their hands remained in her skirt's pocket as she took large strides towards them.
タマオ、昨日の夜どこ行ってたの？まさかあなたまで消えたんじゃないかって。
ヤンキー族の野蛮集会ですか？棍棒を振り回したり、火の周りで踊ったりしてたんですか？
ちげえよ。あとヤンキーって言うな。
Tamo saw a small stick next to her feet, which had likely been dropped by a bird. She kicked it as hard as he could, making it dance in the wind.
ちょっと野暮用で。それよか、成田と空子が出ていくとこにばったり出くわしたよ。
え？出ていくって何よ？
ボテバラでしたか？
あ？
それよりも私の質問に答えて。二人は空子と成田がどうしたのよ？
それはわかんねえけど、伝言はあるぜ。
なんです？つまらないメッセージだったらリテイクですよ。
空子からはお元気でだと。
That was probably a final farewell, but Tamo presented it with a little care.
それで
Little care.
成田からは？
ないよ。何もないのが伝言だとよ。
ないですか。まあ、らしいといえばらしいです。
まあ、つまんねえ伝言だよな。ひねりもねえし。今度会えたらやり直しって言わないとな。
まったくです。ボテバラだとしても、サクが思わず鼻声で、ウケるというまでやり直させます。
たとえ鼻声じゃなくても、私そんなこと言わないから。そう。なんで二人とも理由を言ってくれなかったのかな。
マジで駆け落ちとかじゃねえの？エルの言うとかもある。
そんな、まさか、その、学生の身分で、道徳とか立場とか、お給料とか。
Wages aren't a problem. Saku turned red and began to panic. Eru, in her unfounded wisdom, chose not to ignore her reaction.
いくらなんでも妊娠の話だけで赤面するのは、むっつりエロースすぎます。
別に、私はそんな想像したわけじゃん。
ああ、俺も前からサクはエロそうだと思ってたんだよ。
では、これからサクの部屋にエッチい本がないか漁りに行きましょう。
あるわけないでしょ。ちょっとやめてよ、エル。
ないなら別に調べられてもいいだろ。エル、俺も手伝う。
タマオ、あなたまで。
They spent a while running around, and Saku eventually caught Eru.
哀れ、囚われのエルに。
ま、いくらでもチャンスはあるだろ。
Saku grasped Eru from behind, making her as calm as a cat held by the scruff of its neck. Seeing them, Tamo laughed. Suddenly a strong wind blew by, dispersing the words and making the inner garden silent. Saku looked up at the sky.
そうよね。何もこの学園だけが生きる場所じゃない。成田たちみたいな生き方も別におかしくないよね。
Saku suddenly muttered that, silently but profoundly.
当たり前だろ。人それぞれやつだよ。
あの二人なら、どんな環境でもうまくやるでしょう。知らない土地でも、外国でも、深海でも、宇宙空間でも。
Zaku's mind it mattered not what they did, as long as they were safe. She would trust their decisions. They would live true to themselves, surely. All they'd done was choose a different life than she had, nothing more.
私たちは私たちでやっていかなくちゃね。
I'm still curious what the fuck was the issue with Saku's weird violent outbursts every now and again. Or more, not violent outbursts, more fits of like jealousy, I guess. Fits of bitch. Let's call it that. Chill wind blew through the garden, made the heat of the early summer feel a little more pleasant. Taigi watched the girls joyfully run around the garden from Tokino's empty room. The sight dazzled him. An icon popped up in his vision, informing him that a visitor had arrived. Quickly made the window non-transparent and transformed the room back to its usual appearance.
Taigi-sama.
The armed maid who had been dispatched to Katsuragi Manor returned to the room, entered the room with silent steps.
事の顛末かい？
The Mofo was badly injured but moved nimbly as though feeling no pain. After Kurt bowed, the maid presented Taigi a small package. He opened it and found an old pair of glasses. The lenses were thoroughly broken. The frame was bent. There was dry blood on it. Made him think of Sorako. Glasses her real mother had once worn.
1号、3号、夜店教授の遺体を回収しました。それと、葛城新山の屋敷に生存者はおりません。
ご苦労だったね。
Taigi responded with an expression of sincerity, one he rarely showed to others. The tragic end pained him. Had he perhaps felt a hint of regret? Could he have stopped Narita or Sorako? Or could he have prevented Tokino Yomise from going? Probably wouldn't have been able to do any of that. After all, they were driven by their pure, unstoppable will. Regardless of what he chose, he merely would have thrown a pebble into the bottomless sea, in the boundless sea. Perhaps that would have caused ripples, but nothing would have fundamentally changed. If this truly was the end, he simply had to accept it. Even though that didn't make the pain in his heart go away, it was his only option.
悲しき愛の結末に。
Taigi listlessly muttered that prayer to himself. How many days had passed? The church on Okushima's riverside was said to be an empty, abandoned building. It was a town as ruled as Okushima, you'd rarely, if ever, come across the kind of tramps or hoodlums who would have any sort of use for an abandoned building. The priest who previously owned it was an eccentric man who never associated with others, so the locals didn't care much for it, and were mostly fine leaving it to rot. However, strange rumors had begun to circulate recently. Some said that light often leaked out of the eerie, empty church at night. It had become an urban legend of sorts, a ghost story. The locals, however, were too busy to care about the truth of the matter. But the revenge tragedy still continued. Shinzon Narita had survived after spilling much blood and taking many lives. On that date, the night when I had completed my revenge on Shinzon Katsuragi and Tokino Yomise, I was fatally wounded by Sorako. I managed to make it all the way to my hideout before passing out. The church we'd used as a hideout was officially off limits. Made for good cover, hiding us from Kurofune's prying eyes. Made it out in my life, but the wound was so grave that I needed time to recover. During that time, Kurofune discovered what happened at Katsuragi Manor and improved the academy's security, making it even harder to infiltrate. However, I still found an opening. With the loss of powerful cards like Tokino Yomise and the armed maids, Kurofune had lost a lot of his power. The proof of that was the very fact that he still hadn't discovered my hideout. Even if it was a suicide mission, I wanted to force Kurofune to pay for his sins at long last.
菱谷、準備はできたかね？
今しばらく時間が必要です、ご主人様。なんといっても今度は城攻め。外からスクールを攻めることになります。超無謀で頭悪い作戦ですので。
相変わらず辛辣なことだ。なるべく急いでくれ。
Only one sinner remained. As soon as I killed Kurofune, my revenge would be complete.
せめてこの部屋での仕事は成田様が受け持ってくださると、菱谷も調査の仕事がはかどるのですが。
無理なことを言うものではないよ。
Sorako slept on the bed in the room Hishiya pointed out. Shots we'd exchanged that night hadn't killed either of us. In the very last moment I realized Soroko's intention and fired a non-lethal shot on purpose. Out of luck to my own failing to dodge. We hadn't talked since that night. Hishiya had looked after her this whole time. Honestly, I wouldn't have minded getting shot by Sorako and Hibiki, even if it meant I abrupt end of my play.
とか、ご自分に酔われてるのではと、医師は見抜いたりしていますが、ぶっちゃけ、息汚く生き残ってしまった今更ですので、選ぶってもしゃあないのではと思います。
言う通りかもしれないが。
But what could I even say to Sorako? Anything that came to mind seemed too early or too late.
それはもう、こういった事情でなるようになってしまったからには、冴えたやり方はたった一つしかございませんでしょう。
うん。それはどんな？ぜひともご教授願いたい。
Had you happened to cross an idea that would fix my relation with Sorako?
はい。ご主人様がビシッと土下座して、すまん、俺が悪かった。もう二度としないから許してくれ、と無様に泣き言を申されれば、万事解決でございます。男と女がこじれた場合、200% 男が悪いと相場が決まっております。
応用な私も、その言われなき差別的論理には素直にうなずけないところがあるのだが。
差別ではなく、レディーファーストでございます。あはー、さようでございますか。ハードでボイルドなご主人様の人生的には、女に下げる頭はないと、そうおっしゃるのですね。
My dearest maid left those harsh words behind as she returned to her job. But then she turned around.
一応、あまりおすすめできませんが、もう一つやり方があるのですが。
差別的発言ではないのかね。
いえ、どっちかというと、超差別的発言ですので、医師やあまりおすすめはしかねます。
念のために聞こ
The maid cleared her throat before continuing.
こういう時は、愛していると耳元でささやけば、大概のことは解決するそうでございます。
Confirming that Sorako was asleep, I suddenly stalked into the room. She had more or less recovered as well, so I couldn't allow her to remain at the church forever. But where would she go then? Shinzon had rid her of her home. Once Kurofune was defeated, she would no longer have any place to return
う。
to.
倒したら、私はどうするというのだろう。
I touched Soroko's cheeks as I muttered those words to myself. Revenge was a brief flame. It was fueled by hatred and promised no tomorrow to those who embraced it. Couldn't start a new day without seeing it through to the end, but I didn't see any happiness at the end of the tunnel either. People had a right to be happy. I'd said those words to Hibiki, but I never once considered my own happiness. After all, my life had been nurtured amidst the flames of revenge. Still, I had no regrets. It was a path I chose myself. However, it was also a path that led to Sorako wielding a gun. What was Soraka trying to shoot that night? It couldn't have been my heart. The heart that once boiled with hatred was now filled with an otherworldly sense of emptiness. Soraka had surely caused that change.
君が目覚めたら、少し話をしたい。
I said that and brought my face to the sleeping beauty's ear and whispered into it so as to not disturb her dream.
愛しているよ。
I'd left for a bit, but when I returned, the bed was empty.
ヒシア、ソラコはどこへ？
いえ、医師やも見ておりません。まさか、出て行かれたのでは。
傷の癒えたばかりのあんな体で、どこへ？
行って、しまわれたんでしょうか。
Soraka had left. She took many lives, carried the weight of sin, disappeared without a word, much like a pilgrim heading to the wasteland.
ソラコらしいな。
医師やが探してまいります。まだ、そう遠くには行っておられないでしょうから。
いや、構わない。ソラコが選んだことだ。
よろしいのですか？
That was her choice. What right did I have to speak out against her decision?
それよりも、今夜黒船と決着をつける。
それは、また突然な。
ソラコはここを出た。スクールに戻るつもりなら、私の居場所も黒船の耳に入ってしまう。時間がないかもしれない。
医者や的に、ソラコ様はそういう方ではないように思いますが。
ソラコがどう出るにせよ、私は自分のなすべきを果たす。
追っかければいいのに。
準備を頼む、シア。 黒船と決着をつけよう。
承知いたしました、ご主人様。
Our conversation had ended. Ishia gave me a perfect bow, lowering her head as far down as possible. With her gone, I was left alone and traced a dents at the empty bed with my finger. Soraka once used that very bed. Was there a better choice I could have made somewhere?
ご主人様、今夜の準備。
Ishia returned to find an empty room. Gently, early summer wind blew in through the open window. The thin curtains danced into their presence. To Ishia, it looked like the wings that reached out towards the endless sky. Ishia looked right and left, and stuck her head outside to confirm that no one was around.
そうですか、成田様。
Strangely satisfied, the maid nodded to herself.
復讐よりも価値あるものを見つけられたのですね。
He left to capture the bird who'd escaped. He'd chosen a path besides listening to his burning hatred. That path would not be easy. He would face many troubles that were as bad, if not worse, than he would have otherwise. Two of them could never forget the past. They would carry it with them until the bitter end. However, they'd accepted that fact. All they've done was of their own volition. Together, they would surely make it. True freedom was impossible for people. Even if they had unlimited choices, there was only one real answer for them to pick. The important thing wasn't to lament your lack of freedom, but to enjoy it and search for happiness in spite of it. The blue sky was shockingly clear. Thinking that it would be rude to follow them, she had decided that she had to do what she had to. She began with chores, which she followed up with concealment and Operation Cancellation cleanup. There were many things she had to do to make sure Kurofune never found that church. Master Narita would surely have been troubled if Ishia left this place. He was a selfish, hopeless master, but also a man capable of profound kindness, which he'd showed when he saved Ishia long ago. That was why she chose to believe him. She chose to believe that one day would find what he was looking for and return to that abandoned church. That was actually a surprisingly nice ending.
This とある男と女の再生の物語である。
At the end of love, achievement unlocked. Hint corner. Look, because apparently there isn't anything there if you chose no.
ペルシェマン賞海賊版。
He's lacking some energy this time. You okay?
Hello, everybody! Kids, the taktik!
Nah, I'm not gonna do that. Fuck you. Perhaps the choices you can make here are get riddled with bullets. Perhaps there should be an option of not choosing at all. That basically confirms it. There was no actual fucking choice there. All of them were correct. Rip sailing there. Who killed sworn enemy? Also, I can actually see like the names. Because I skipped. We never saw the like rip sailing day thing for her. That's basically like the episode name, I guess.
と言っても今回は野外からお送りしていますのでぶっちゃけ席はありません。
I mean, ground.
1万トンで2000年ぶりのお久しぶりです。シベリア地区で75人の視聴者の皆さん、よだれを垂らしてお待ちかねペルシェマンショーのコーナーでございます。超ジーンときて感動もののエンディングの余韻台無し間違いなしなので、ソラコ様とのエヘヘプレーな日々を反芻していたい方はさっさと選択肢で見ないを選びやがれ。さて、ソラコ様ルートは復讐譚らしいまさに悲恋なスタイル。 あなたは敵なのかしら。え、なんですって？ハローレディはエリート学園で恋を育むノーブル青春ラブストーリーじゃなかったのか？それはもうちゃんとエリート学園で恋を育んでおります。何一つ間違っておりませんとも。ちょっと青春血まみれなのはご主人様の不徳の致すところ。今度締めちゃいましょう。
No, 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 don't worry, it's fine. It's certainly better than Princess of Angel.
あまり時間取ってると巻き入れるようにとうるさいですから、そろそろ次回のヒントに参りましょう。空子様ルートと赤人様ルートの両方をクリアするとどこかに選択肢が増えていたりするかもしれません。新しい世界が開けてくるような気がしますよね。
What? The choice is about riding a fucking flying carpet. Listen, I couldn't make a more intelligent joke there because I forgot the lyrics to the song, okay? Shut the fuck up. I actually never watched that. I watched Aladdin from the Disney movie. Now I'll watch that. Thinking about it, I think I've actually watched surprisingly few, Disney movies. Honestly, just thinking of Kingdom Hearts 2, because that's the one I played the most, and where I know all the fucking words basically. I've watched Hercules, I've watched Mulan, I've watched Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's it, isn't it? Other worlds are Atlantica. I've never watched The Little Mermaid. Agrabah. Never watched Aladdin, like I just said. Then Beast's Castle. And I've watched Beauty and the Beast. Am I missing something? Night Before Christmas. That's the one I missed. Night Before Christmas. Also never watched it. Those should be all the Disney worlds in Kingdom Hearts 2, I think. Unless I'm really forgetting something massive. I don't count Timeless River. Just before you complain. Kingdom Hearts 2 all Disney worlds. Right, Lion King. I've watched Lion King. Forgot Lion King. Hate that world though, so maybe I just try to push it from my mind. I don't count Disney Castle. Right, 100 Acre Woods, but well, every kid has watched at least a few fucking episodes. Why is Twilight Town oh, it's because all of the worlds are counted there. I haven't watched Tron as well. Got that one as well. By God, I'm bad. Anyways.
おっと、次のルートをクリアする前にバッドエンドも残らず回収しておくのがおすすめです。回収しなくても特に何もないんですけどね。それではまた他のルートのクリア後にお会いしましょう。
I mean, I guess I could make that a whole route in and of itself, a whole video in and of itself, just gathering all the bad ends. Well, I could just do it now. That's also an option. Nah, it's 1:30. I don't want to do this right now. Got I think I've only have one more bad end going, don't I? Hold on, scenario select. Just show me all the Hirushiman shows. on, let me just... Hello, lady. Route guide. You should have a route guide for all the bad ends as well. So, you know what? Let's just do this real quick. Let's just do this.
Yeah, fuck off. So, meet them boldly. That's not what I wanted. Don't fucking pierce my eardrums like that. Meet them with vigor. Courtyard research facility showed up. We now know what that is about. All the ones that go research facility are now to be ignored until tomorrow, I guess. Why are there just specific bad ends for research facility? I have to like start the next part for that. Forgot. That'll be rude. Anyways, courtyard. Guess I'll do all of them though I don't have to go research facility. I don't care. Then do appreciate the offer, but don't tell I can't.
あなたのつくべき役職は
That one apparently. I know that choice doesn't actually change anything by now. So who cares? Oh, there's also a new one. Okay, I got it. That's all the ones that are like, oh, go for the choices for Eru are just what I'm gonna do at a different date. So, Rose Garden, apparently. Then, outside, apparently. This is not the outside. And here I'm supposed to massage them kindly.
Nani?
And here, dorm. I guess this is gonna be the one where it's like, ah, he forgot. Yeah, it was. Then the second one, I don't know what that one's gonna be. Yeah, I get it. Shut the fuck up. Then, need to boldly. Need them with vigor. Hallway.
ふむ、策が見当たらない。
Then, after hallway goes, I do appreciate the offer.
と言ってもあなたのつくべき役職
Sam Slut.
では課題をスタートします。
Rose Garden. Fuck, I'm still on the right track though. Just go do away with the bad end one list. I accidentally followed the bad end one list a bit there. Living room. Massage them kindly again.
Nani?
Dorm. Hallway. School building.
今日はどうしました成田くん。わざわざ訪ねてくるとは。
時の女子にどうしても伝えねばならないことがあったのでね。
スクールの生活で何か不備がありましたか？あなたは貴重な男性トワールですが、手違いで音無さんたちと同じ寮での生活を余儀なくされています。我が学園としてもできうる限りの便宜は図らせてもらいたいと思っています。
それは話が早くて助かる。ぜひとも頼みたいことがあったのだよ。
何でしょう？可能なことであればいいのですが。
ならば問題ない。揉ませてもらえないだろうか。
はい。
Just the utter look of confusion, like what?
はいではない。揉ませてほしい。
いや、いきなりそれはさすがに予想外ね。成田くん、桃ならサクか玉岡エルかソラコはダメですが、だからといって私というのは
時の女子の豊満なる奇跡を この手で確かめたくて夜も眠れない。そう、私は時の女子を愛してしまったのだよ。
待ちなさい。それは愛じゃなくて、もっと別の。
えい、つべこべ言わずにおとなしくしたまえ。
やめなさい。待ちな。やめ、成田君、いや。
これでいいのだ。
And we just murdered her
ペルシェマン賞海賊
maybe
団
half an hour ago. Probably not even half an hour ago. The blood's still on our hands! We reached for the chest of the next one.
あまりのオチに一瞬我を忘れてしまいました。おはようございます。ペルシェマンショーのコーナーです。恋は嵐のようにやってくるもの。何もかも振り捨てて燃え上がったりするかもしれないし、しないかもしれない。ご主人様、思い込みは激しいですからね。さて、このエンディングに来たということは、当然のように足りなかったのに加えて、夜店様に心奪われちゃうような事件があったわけです。
Listen, you can't fucking blame me for this. I just really like teachers. By the way, I can't see the camera actually, so I don't even have an idea if you can actually fucking see this because the fucking guide is in the way. I know why I decided to do that. I just really felt like it. Sometimes you just wish to commit violence. It's normal.
人生些細なトラブルで道を踏み外すこともありますから、普段からおかしな行動に出なかったかどうか十分注意してくださいね。それではまた他のエンディングでお会いしましょう。
Actually, I probably just, considering that it did some bad endings at the start of the last round, I could probably just put them at the beginning of the next one. The ones that require the Eru selections. Anyways, next up should be 4, which I can actually do. And 5 requires the research facility again. So 3, 4... No, 3, 5... 3 and 5 require research facility. So we're going for bad end 4 now. I think one of them I should already have though. I sadly don't fucking remember which one. It's probably the one where nah, that one also has
これは
escalated
男の反逆と
for anything.
自由へ至る道のりの物語で
Yeah, we get it. Need them boldly, please. Need them with vigor, please. We're just doing a lot of needing right now. It's like a fucking... We're making fucking cake now. Courtyard. We're needing the dough. Not for cake, actually. You don't really need dough cake. Cake dough. Not dough cake. What the fuck am I doing? Anyways, I refuse!
と言っても、あなたのつくで。
Gentleman does not escalate for anything.
では課題をした。
Then dorm living room, apparently. If the sixth choice, actually, if the sixth choice is my room, I can't pick it. So the sixth choice is classroom for the bad ending 6, though. So I can just go for the bad ending 6 now as well. So dorm living room was it? There we go. The next one is living room. Just without dorm. I don't know why they changed the phrasing. Massage them kindly.
Nani?
Then we go into the dorm. A cafeteria, apparently. School building.
Yep, 4 was one we've already had. On to bad end 6 it is. Start. One of the either bad end 3 or bad end 5 is probably like the maxed out zeal.
とある男の物語だ。
guessing.
男の反
Yeah,
逆
we
と
fucking get it. I don't care,
自由
kid.
へ至る道
I
の
just
り
want to get
の
through this. I need to take a piss. I need a boulder. Need them with vigor. This you need to need them with proper vigor. Otherwise, you won't get proper pasta. Well, always 6 is again for
ふむ、策が見当た
Tokise. Then I refuse.
と言っても、あなたのつくべき
Sorako-Route. A gentleman does not ask a lady for anything.
では課題をスタートし
Classroom.
それでは講義
Living room. Massage them kindly.
何
I'm not doing anything really. Courtyard apparently. That's a Tamo choice. I appreciate Tamo choice. Tamo is fucking fantastic. Hallway. That's. I feel like that's gonna be an ending we already had. My room for Soraka choice. Already had that ending? Odd. Oh well. Guess we'll just have to do the bad ending 3 and 5 tomorrow. During the start of Edo's route. So hope you guys enjoyed this one and see you next time. Bye bye.